Welcome in. Happy New Year as we kick off January 1st the right way, getting you ready for this NBA slate across the board with the deeper dive. First of two that we have, the deeper dive live before lock, before everything locks away in about 2 hours. And yes, I see the chat was chomping at the bit. I hope it's Rinpack today. Man, I love that, dude. I need me some Rinpack today. Don't worry. We have answered all of your questions, all of your concerns, all of your hopes. Yes, he is here. The man is in the house. Rinpack. Tyler's producing. Hit that thumbs up. Just for Rinpack's appearance alone, hit that thumbs up button and make sure you're subscribed. How you doing, man? Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you as well. Excited to be on for the first deeper dive of 2022. It's crazy. Time flies, and yet we are. It's a brand new year, and excited to talk about tonight's 5-game slate. It's going to be another health and safety protocol filled slate, but more importantly, I hope everyone had a great New Year's Eve and New Year's. I hope everyone has a great New Year ahead.
Are you a resolution person, or do you look at it as a fruitless activity?
Resolutions are made to be failed, just like plans.
Records are made to be broken. Resolutions are made to be failed. I like it. You could coin your new phrase with that.
Yeah, I mean, New Year's resolutions are cool when you're a kid and whatnot, but nowadays, if you're a goal-oriented person, I feel like goals are great. You can always have goals, but you don't need resolutions just for a new year. You can always have goals in a day in and day out basis.
I got to say, I'm very nice and comfortable in this little zip up that I got for my birthday in December, but that sweater, whatever you're wearing, looks way more comfortable than what I have.
Oh, it's very comfortable. Very, very comfortable.
What is that?
It's a Sherpa that I saw in this
nice.
I was at a hotel, the boutique. It was the summertime, and I was like, this looks awfully comfy in Denver. And I was like, I'm just gonna cop this. And it definitely has lived up to every penny that I purchased it for. So I'm very comfortable in this.
I love it, my friend. All right. So when you look at everything across the board here, this slate, you mentioned health and protocol. It's been like that since day one. That's not going away. Nice to see the boss man in the house. Happy New Year to him. And also just kind of how you've been approaching this slate, knowing that it's a shorter slate, 5 games on there. So what are you looking at overall, also combining injury/absence due to COVID?
No, for sure. And especially with NBA, news is always evolving. The slate changes from game to game. Ownership will change from game to game. Projections will kind of change as news comes out. And looking from an aerial perspective, going into it, I try to navigate which teams are health and safety protocol ridden. It's unfortunate for the teams, but as fantasy players, DFS players, we look to take advantage of that situation. Try to pinpoint guys who are going to play a lot of minutes, and hopefully their salary is low enough where they make for viable options for us to spend up for example, tonight, we want to look for the value options to spend up for Nikola Jokic in an absolute dream matchup against the Rockets. So what teams are health and safety protocol ridden? And we're going to be talking about 2 teams, especially. They actually face against each other. That's going to be taking up quite a bit of ownership in tonight's slate.
Yeah. And honestly, anybody who has full access to what we have going on here, now is the time, as we tell you routinely, to sign up. We're constantly having deals for you for Awesemo Plus Platinum as well. So our ownership projections and everything that we're going to use on site projections that Alex and team have from Awesemo, you mentioned as far as the Spurs and Pistons game, and we'll begin there. I will say, though, your influence is world renowned, as we know, Rinpack. And Alex Baker on the chat made my New Year's resolutions yesterday and then just scrapped them now. Thanks, Rinpack. So your impact is going all the way up to the top here at this company.
Alex had quite the dapper New Year's Eve. Shout out to his New Year's Eve fit last night. And I'm assuming Mrs. Awesemo took that photo. Alex was looking quite sharp. But, yeah, I mean, Alex doesn't need resolutions. He just crushes everything he does. So we don't need to worry about him.
A New Year's resolution would be to spread the wealth, but I can't fault him for not wanting to do that by any means. So let's jump into it. And it doesn't matter if it's a cheap option or if it's maybe more of a spend up. You referenced it, Detroit, San Antonio. This is the game where we're seeing a lot of ownership at the top. DK, FanDuel, really across the board here. So let's begin with this game. We have Garza really as the highest owned guy, even on a Jokic slate. So looks to be the healthy counter pivot, if you will. So we can start with Garza simply because he has the most ownership, at least on DK, that we're seeing at that spot. We also have Derek White and a couple of other guys in this game that a lot of the field is getting to.
Yeah, it's ironically enough, a lot of people who look at box scores that used to play DFS, they've gone to this data-driven approach. I mean, if you look at Luka Garza's box score, you love that he played 39 minutes. You hate that he went 1 of 10 last game, right? So I will take these 39 minutes. I know it's a Jakob Poeltl matchup, but the Detroit team's just shorthanded. 4,300 does take up a center spot on DK. I'm looking to spend up for that center spot to Jokic, but if you want to roll with a 2-center option with Garza, that's fine. I think it's an okay matchup against Poeltl, but the minutes is what's going to carry you there. The $4,300, especially a 2-center build on DK, it makes a lot of sense to potentially save one, use one center with Garza at the utility spot or the center spot. But in the other Detroit guys that I think you should be looking to spend up for, guys like Saddiq Bey and Hamadou Diallo, I know their ownership is also kind of significant, but these guys are the offensive guys that are going to take a lot of shots. Last game, we saw Frank Jackson roll his ankle and get hurt. And Saddiq Bey and Hamadou Diallo proceeded to, I think, almost just combined to shoot 38 times. I like Saddiq Bey to get that 3-point bonus on DK. Diallo has the offensive shooting game. He shot pretty efficiently, 13 of 19. I don't expect that to continue, but I expect the minutes to be there, barring any injury or foul trouble. The Frank Jackson injury now opens up a very interesting play in Cassius Stanley. And at $3,000, Cassius Stanley stands out to be a pretty awesome value option. I just think he's going to need to be required to play all those minutes. You'd like him to shoot better than 2 for 10, but at $3K, it's $3,000 on DK. We got to look to that value to potentially jam in Nikola Jokic. We're just trying to find all the ways to jam in Jokic today. And Cassius Stanley definitely does that at $3K. He came out of Duke. He's a super athletic guy. He was in the dunk contest last year. Played for the Pacers for a little bit. He has athleticism. You'd like him. It's $3K. I'm just going to be. I'd be willing to go over the field on a guy like Cassius Stanley just because he's $3,000, and he just opens up a lot of things for you.
So real quick, I just want to follow up on Stanley, and then also just a question on Garza regarding FanDuel and kind of looking at him as any option of a pivot on that single center build. But with Stanley, is there a number? And it doesn't even need to be an exact number. We're only dealing with 5 games on this slate, so I don't imagine that ownership is going to be a driving factor for you. But does it get to a point where if this number increases, we haven't projected at 34.3, maybe that bumps up to 39, 42, depending on how things shake out by lock. Does it get to be too much from a field standpoint, or does that not matter on a 5-game slate for you?
So on a 5-game slate, it's small enough where if you're aggressively over the field on him, and there's a lot of ways that the only downside is you're going to be competing with a lot of Cassius Stanley lineups, and a lot of these Cassius Stanley lineups will probably have Nikola Jokic. So that combination is going to be very just popular in terms of builds. Now we'll talk about some pivots off of Cassius Stanley. There's a pivot in this game off of Cassius Stanley, a guy like Bryn Forbes. Pivot in the sense, Bryn Forbes also shooting guard eligible at 3,200. Doug McDermott has entered health and safety protocols. Bryn Forbes played 20 minutes last game. We've seen the ability of Bryn Forbes hit 3-pointers. That's he's a 3-point specialist. He was with the Bucks last year. He's now back in San Antonio. And Bryn Forbes is someone, I think, a pivot off of Cassius Stanley ownership. I'd be willing to take some chances in non-Cassius Stanley lineups to go to Bryn Forbes. And a pivot like that can separate you from all the Cassius Stanley lineups if Bryn Forbes outscores Cassius Stanley. But I just think Cassius Stanley is going to project for better, going to project for more minutes. It would just be an ownership type of play situation there.
So on FanDuel, Gafford is clearly, just based off of ownership alone, going to be the pivot at the center spot for a lot of people away from Jokic. If you wanted to truly counter the field, though, it looks like there's a pretty good opportunity with Garza at 5K with only 13.4% owned. Again, there's the risk clearly inherent in selecting him, but you're significantly lower to the field for both Gafford, the pivot, and Jokic, the favorite.
Yeah, so my priority is Nikola Jokic. The Denver team's also going to be shorthanded. It just seems like it's not super necessary to play 5K for Luka Garza. I'd rather be looking to spend $1,100 more for Jakob Poeltl. I think Jakob Poeltl has 50-point upside in this matchup against Detroit. And that's just naturally, I think, just because I'm willing to target the upside and the other centers on FanDuel, it's very crucial that you got to get the FanDuel center right. So you only get one. Unlike on DraftKings and Yahoo, you can roster up to two. And if you nail that that FanDuel center, it really helps you be able to potentially late swap if you nailed it right away in the beginning of the night. But it's just the opportunity cost of missing out on a Jokic 70-plus performance. It's just you're going to need those 70 points on a 5-game slate if Jokic can put up that type of score.
All right, so real quick then, before we move on, and anybody else that you want to slide in there as well, on the center slate, just going off of what you referenced with Pirtle on FanDuel, 6,300. So it's a 2K difference of what you would spend on DraftKings, but you can definitely counter a lot of the field by getting to a Jokic Pirtle lineup as opposed to a Garza Jokic lineup.
Yeah, and we'll touch on different value points, and that'll cause for a very different, unique build. Right now, Jakob Pirtle is only checking in with 12% ownership for San Antonio at $6,300 on DraftKings. And I even like that situation on Yahoo as well. And Pirtle is someone who has had some ceiling performances, and the Detroit matchup doesn't scare me. You would like him to play consistently 30-plus minutes. He just hasn't seen 30-plus minutes dating back to December 20th. He played 30 minutes against the Clippers then, and he put up 50 fantasy points against the Clippers team. And I hope Pirtle can get going, and maybe the offense goes through him and Derek White potentially have that two-man game. It's just I think the upside for Pirtle to potentially play 30-plus minutes and eat against Luka Garza is kind of likely. And I like his price tag even on Yahoo, $22. And his ownership's a little too low and gives me for a unique roster build potentially.
This is the command that you have over the channel. Orton's neckbeard. If the man in the sheepskin coat says Pirtle, I'm playing Pirtle. I'm telling you, this coat is a hit tonight. Is this the first time you've rocked this?
On stream? Yeah, on stream. Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. This needs to be like a weekly occurrence for you, brother, because this thing is almost as popular as the insight and picks you're giving out.
Hey, I had to bring out the style of the new year. Gotta give what the crowd wants, right?
I love it, man. All right. Anybody else that you'd like to target, even if it's a lower cost, or especially if it's somebody that the field hasn't got to on this game?
Hopefully the recency bias of people being shied away from Derek White's minutes last game. He had, I think, a gash under his eye, so he had to leave the game for a little bit. Derek White has 50-point upside in a matchup versus Detroit, and his price tag is $28 on Yahoo, $7K on DraftKings. He's a little bit more expensive on FanDuel, $7,900, but he is probably my favorite Spur to target just because I think it's very safe for him to play 30-plus minutes in this matchup. It's a shorthanded team. Derek White just has to run the show. It's his show. No DeJounte Murray there. No Doug McDermott. Not like Doug McDermott's taking a bunch of shots from him, but just a guy who could potentially shoot some threes is not there for him. And the Spurs team is interesting. It's a shorthanded team. There's no McDermott. We've seen Keita Bates-Diop start he started the game last game, and he's been pretty good when he gets minutes, kind of inconsistent. We've seen games of 30 fantasy points last game, 40 fantasy points against the Lakers a few games ago. Seems like everyone pops off against the Lakers, but it's a Detroit team who is probably the worst team in the league. And Keita Bates-Diop, I expect to start at $3,800. He makes for a pretty nice spend down option. I don't mind going to him also. Just keep an eye on that starting lineup as well.
All right, my friend, let's move to the Bulls, Wizards, Chicago's in Washington. I was a little surprised to see this total up at 221, but we can keep an eye on that. Odd Shopper, of course, is a great place to match everything. That's free, so you don't even need to worry about what's going on here on Awesemo, which I'm going to tell you in 1 second. Corey Randall, see that super chat. We're going to get to that in just 1 second here for Rinpack. But point being is that we have this game, 221 as the total. Couple of guys we'll get to that are getting owned, or at least some higher ownership there at the top. But I did mention, playing along, pardon me, with what we're doing here on Awesemo. And just because it's 2022 doesn't mean that everything we've done last year is done. For $20, you can get full access to Awesemo Plus tools, data for 22 days. That's it. Use our promo code 2022. It's that simple, 2022. And for the next 22 days for $20, you'll get full access to Awesemo Plus tools, everything you have. And if you want to look at something bigger, we have Happy 22. So those two, 2022 for the next 22 days, and then Happy 22 for a year, 20% off that year of Awesemo Plus Platinum. We keep telling you that every tool we have available for you on site here is part of the Awesemo Plus Platinum. You don't have to wait one day a week for this to be free. And then in return, just hit that thumbs up button. Rinpack's in the house. He's styling here for you. It's Saturday, New Year's Day. Hit that thumbs up. And we should get to this real quick. Corey Randall asking about Trey Jones on that super chat.
Yeah, I saw, will Trey Jones get some runs today? Right now, we have him projected for 20 minutes. Trey Jones, also out of Duke. He is Tyus Jones's brother. If you guys didn't know that by now. Trey Jones, I do think Trey Jones will get run. We have him for 20 minutes, and that could potentially fluctuate to mid-20s. And if you're building multiple lineups and you want to spend down to Trey Jones, you can. I wouldn't fault you for it. He has shown the upside. He was pretty darn good in the summer league. So I've noticed his play since then. It's just that I don't feel confident in him to play 30 minutes. Feel confident that potentially Cassius Stanley at 3K is going to play. We have him for 29 and a half minutes for Cassius Stanley. I'd rather just spend $3,000 on Stanley and get 9 extra minutes out of him.
All right, so we move to game 2 here on this 5-game slate, and Chicago's in Washington. We talked already about a couple of centers, and clearly in the backdrop of it, it's always going to be Jokic up here. He's going to be that pay-up option. A lot of people in the field getting to him, but especially on DK with that 2-center build, Daniel Gafford, even referenced Gafford on FanDuel as far as getting the pivot. The field loves Gafford tonight. Let's see how much Rinpack loves him.
Yeah, the field definitely loves Dan Gafford. Dan Gafford's taking on his former team. If revenge matters to you guys, if you guys are trying to go down narrative street. But Dan Gafford, pardon me if I'm wrong, I believe he did injure his ankle at the end of the game, or he injured his leg at some point during the game last game, and he played great. It was a short slate, 3-game slate. Dan Gafford played 32 minutes, just missed out on the double-double. I expect him to play a ton of minutes against Nikola Vucevic. Mm-hmm. Dan Gafford's done a better job this year of limiting himself out of foul trouble, but it's always in his bag. And Vucevic has been a monster since he's came back from health and safety protocols. He's another low-owned pivot off of the Jokic ownership over there on FanDuel. Over here on DraftKings, you're going to get a Vooch, a very low ownership. And Vooch has the potential to outscore Jokic in a way. Well, Jokic would have to get in blowout round foul trouble or just hurt. But those are tough things to always project for. But
they could also blow Houston out.
Yeah. But the team is shorthanded to the fact where I think Jokic is going to have to play a full run. And the team without Nikola Jokic, a lot of advanced stats have the Denver Nuggets the worst team in the NBA without Jokic on the floor, and the best team in the NBA when Jokic is on the floor. It's how crazy good he is. But Dan Gafford at 5,600 is a great mid-tier option. I can't argue with a double-double upside on DraftKings. Can pick up those steals and blocks on FanDuel, so prefers the scoring there. And Gafford, especially on Yahoo, $18 is a fantastic play there as well. So I really like Gafford on Yahoo as well. He's just a great play across the board. I can't really argue with you if you want to get above the field with him. Based on our boom bust percentage, as I pulled that up, other guys in this game, all of Bulls Twitter has been all about DeMar DeRozan. They've been calling him the king of the fourth. They love this guy of late. He hit that one-legged three-point winner last night. The Bulls team on a back-to-back. One thing that is going to stand out for them for minutes to open up for potentially Ayo Dosunmu is no Javante Green, I believe, for the Bulls today. So he was playing he played 27 minutes last game, 23 minutes the game before. I expect Dosunmu to pick up those minutes. He was getting the start. We should see who gets the start in terms of Javante Green. It wouldn't shock me if it's Dosunmu. It wouldn't also shock me if it's also they potentially want to go to Troy Brown as well, who's $3,300. So keep an eye on that situation there. It's a moving situation, and whoever starts is not going to be the top option in offense. It's just I expect them to play in the mid-20s minutes. They're going to be the fifth option, honestly, on offense for this team in that starting lineup. But it's just going to open up minutes and another value option for you to spend up for Jokic.
So what about Kobe White popping up a bunch? He's got a pretty high grade that we have on our boom bust tool, even in the optimal lineup coming up high. He's the highest guy in this game outside of Daniel Gafford. Are you looking to get to him with some pretty decent leverage compared to his ownership?
Yeah. Kobe White, obviously, getting these minutes because of no Alonzo Ball there.
Yep.
He is someone that you can go to. I'm be willing to kind of look elsewhere, potentially with Kobe White at $4,900. I know the ownerships there, our boom percentage and ownership are really equal to based on Kobe White. I just don't think 6 of 7 from 3 is repeatable. 7-11 from the last game, but I do expect those minutes to be 30 plus, and that's what's going for him. There have been many games that he's played 30 plus and he's disappointed. In a game versus Indiana on the 26th, he only put up 13 fantasy points. He's very inconsistent. He's just been riding pretty hot the last 3 games. At $4,900, I think I'd be willing to come in under the field on a guy like Kobe White just because there's some other outstanding value in the point guard, shooting guard positions as well. It's just an ownership play. The upside we've seen the last couple games, but I just think the ownership's a little too high for my liking. I think I'd be willing to look elsewhere.
All right, we'll get to the Christian Wood super chat here in just a sec, but just kind of winding down with this game specifically. And there's some guys at the top right through the 4,900 KCP. Those are really the 3 guys that are popping up. You mentioned DeRozan. What about on the other side here, right? You've got Washington with KCP, Beal, and Kuzma.
Yeah, Washington on the Washington side, I'm looking to Bradley Beal. He's 10-3. He's expensive. But Bradley Beal is now back to the last couple of years of Bradley Beal, taking 20-plus shot attempts. No Spencer Dinwiddie there. I love the shot attempts for Bradley Beal. That's definitely $8,700. I'm willing to go above the field on him. He's probably one of my favorite stud pay-up options outside of Jokic on the slate. I prefer Beal to DeRozan and Zach LaVine by a decent amount. I just think the upside for Beal is definitely there. In the Chicago side of things, these guys are obviously rotating usage. It's just kind of like picking your poison. In a matchup versus Washington, I'm looking to target the front court usually with Vooch. So that's a pivot like off of Jokic. But Bradley Beal, an exceptional spend-up option. Kyle Kuzma, also, he's a little too expensive, but the minutes are great. $7,900 on DraftKings is like, wow. I have never seen Kuzma priced that high. $6,500 on FanDuel makes a lot more sense. Also, the Yahoo price tag, I think you can definitely take your chances with Kuzma coming in only at $23.
That's the break, I would think, right? The 23 on Yahoo. So
yeah, I think also
there,
the field's also getting there, but I have no issues of going above the field with a guy like Kyle Kuzma.
All right, we're going to hit that. Oh, I'm sorry. Only on, yeah, exactly. Just to clarify there for the price break. And again, that's the beauty of it here with the deeper dive live before lock coming your way in about 35 minutes with Greg and Matt LaMarca. So you're all set leading up to lock. We're going to hit this Clippers Nets game in a minute, but Twisted Reality Gaming had a specific question about Christian Wood on the super chat for your impact. Yeah,
Christian Wood. So Christian Wood was a lot more fun to roster when guys like Kevin Porter Jr. and Jalen Green, very inefficient shot attempts going in their route. And Christian Wood is not as active offensively as he could be in a matchup. He's got to worry about containing Jokic, but $8,800 Christian Wood. I just think the guy with the insertion of Jalen Green and KPJ, I'm not that interested in going to Christian Wood. I'd be willing to find those, as crazy as it sounds, those extra $3,000, $3,800, I believe, the difference between Wood and Jokic on DK just to spend up for Nikola Jokic. I'm not that interested in Christian Wood tonight. Over there on FanDuel, I believe he also has Christian Wood also has power forward eligibility, $7,800. If you want to play Christian Wood, I think you can definitely do it on FanDuel. I think it makes a lot more sense to go there for a guy like Christian Wood at $7,800. On DraftKings, where you're taking up a center spot, where it seems like it should be fittingly going to Jokic, I think Christian Wood's not that as an appealing play.
All right, so we have game 3 here now. The Clippers at Brooklyn, and clearly everybody down for LA is going to result in that gigantic 12-point line for the Nets. So take that into account. Still, the total isn't truly impacted with so many guys being down for LA. So we still have a 221 total on that. Looking at it from now who you're looking at targeting individually, we do have Ibaka popping up all over the place from the field as the cheap option on DK for that 4-5 slot. The other guy on the other side of it, where people have no problem paying up in this game, is clearly James Harden, with the expected productivity falling on him. So are you looking at maybe the spend up option in Harden first, or getting to that cheaper, low cost punt option in Ibaka?
So yeah, Ibaka yesterday was a very popular play. He only played 18 minutes, so we heard some coach speak that he might play a lot more minutes. But the field wants to go back to Ibaka, power forward, center eligibility. We have him projected to be a pretty strong value play as well. So, he comes out a great value. There is obviously the downside is Ibaka doesn't play at 18 or doesn't perform as great as he did in 18 minutes in a Brooklyn matchup. We might see a lot of Marcus Morris potentially at the 5, or Amir Coffey slipping his way there. After yesterday on a back-to-back, Ibaka obviously has been in and out of the lineup due to injury. I'm a little concerned, but 18 minutes is I would have felt more confident if we saw Ibaka play mid-20s minutes. I know it was a matchup against Toronto where they went to a lot of Siakam at the 5 at times, and Ibaka really just wasn't needed as much. Now in a matchup versus Brooklyn, we could see KD at the 5. It's just a new era of basketball where Ibaka was great a couple years ago, but I would be willing to come in a little bit under on Serge Ibaka. I know he grades out a great value play. I'm just a little bit concerned if we can get that minutes upside with him in a back-to-back in a matchup versus Brooklyn. And he's just not going to take money offensive shot attempts. You really want him to get there with blocks and rebounds. He was a decent three-point shooter at one point in his career for a big man, but I'm just a little concerned just because I just don't feel as confident yet. I'm sure you can hear that in my tone.
Yeah, absolutely. And it definitely counters what we have on site, because he's the highest projected guy from our boom, bust, and optimal lineups, both respectively. But what you're saying makes sense, where a lot of this projection would be contingent on minutes, would be contingent on being out there. And if it doesn't play out that way, then it's probably going to look significantly under what he's projected from both boom, bust, and optimal. And getting ahead of that by fading it from the field standpoint, it's probably going to put you in a really good position once that happens, I would imagine.
Yeah, it is a pretty decent opportunity cost, because Ibaka can put up, if he's going to play high 20s minutes, he can put up 30 fantasy points, and you're going to be buried for sure. So what to do with that ownership? I think I'd be willing to just come in with the field, just because he has multi-position eligibility, power forward, center. He has power forward, center eligibility on FanDuel as well, coming in at 4K. And he's, I believe, the min still on Yahoo at $10. It's just, I'm a little uncertain, but value is value, and we're looking to jam in Jokic. Now, if you don't want to play Jokic, there are some studs that you can spend up on the Brooklyn side of things, and guys like Harden to Durant. The ownership is going to Harden. I prefer Durant at that ownership discount off of James Harden. Both these guys are going to take their 20-plus shot attempts. Harden getting to the line 18 times last game, I don't think will happen this time with KD around. There's a huge line in this game. There could be a blowout where we don't see them play again full run for this Brooklyn Nets team. On the other side of things, Marcus Morris is back playing a ton of minutes again off of injury. Yeah. I like that he's playing 30-plus minutes. The shot volume's there for him. I really like that price tag for Marcus Morris. The field is also getting there to him as well. I believe at around just north of 20% at this moment, but he's a nice mid-tier option to go to. Now, if you think this game is going to get absolutely out of hand, Justice Winslow found his way to 18 minutes last game as well. If you're going to tell me Justice Winslow and Serge Ibaka are both going to play 18 minutes today, I think I would be willing to spend the extra $100 for Justice Winslow, as crazy as that sounds, because I think the game were to blow out of the 12-point line, I think Winslow can find his way to a mid-20s minutes potentially. And Winslow is just like, at one point, he was a promising prospect with Miami. He was the piece in the Iguodala trade. Didn't play anything in Memphis, just like the last game of the season. And now he's in the Clippers. It's kind of a lost season with the Clippers with Kawhi's ACL and Paul George's, I think, potential Tommy John surgery could happen for him with the torn elbow ligament.
Not good.
Yeah, I think I would like to see them just to roll out with Winslow what they have. Has shown the ability to play good defense and handle the ball. So keep an eye on that situation. I think he's a long shot tournament option in large field GPPs only.
How much does that blowout factor impact getting to guys like Mann and Kennard in this game?
Because this Clippers team is also kind of shorthanded as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
I expect them, unlike the Brooklyn team, they're fully loaded right now, and they're waiting on Kyrie Irving to return very soon. So going to Mann and Kennard are fine options. Terrence Mann picked up a double-double last game. That's kind of been interesting to see how his rebound rate go up throughout the season so far. The minutes are there for him. I like Kennard as well. Kennard, you'd like to see take double-digit shot attempts more frequently to have more confidence in rostering him. But $5,200 on a 5-game slate, one of those guys that have upside to get mid-30s fantasy points. And getting above the field on a guy like that, I have no issues of, because they're coming in pretty sub 10% ownership on DK. Over there on FanDuel, both those guys I have no issues really going to Mann at 54 and Kennard coming in at only $4,900. Shooting guard, small forward eligibility. Really like that Kennard price tag. I had $4,900.
Reggie Jackson, 8,100 on DK just seems like it would be too much. If you're going to spend that, you might as well just spend up a little bit more. 6K on FanDuel. Does that make it any easier?
Yeah, you can definitely go to Reggie Jackson on FanDuel. I expect Reggie Jackson to take high teen shot attempts for the foreseeable future. That was his first game back from COVID. It's a back-to-back. So the conditioning, there was a little bit of concern for him. He did take that rest game that we've seen a lot of players take before returning. So Reggie Jackson, I like at 6K a lot on FanDuel. Reggie Jackson has high 30, 40-point upside in a Brooklyn matchup. We saw what Tyrese Maxey did to them the other night. Not to say Reggie Jackson's Tyrese Maxey, but both guard abilities to create their own shot. I don't mind going to Reggie Jackson, especially on FanDuel.
I'm telling you, man, you're going to break the slate tonight because the entire chat is behind you on this coat. It's got like magical powers. I can feel it through the show here. And everybody now, after you win the Millie, whatever that the multiple tournaments you take down tonight, people will be demanding that you wear this each and every time you make your appearances on the Awesemo DFS channel. I'm just telling you, I could see it already in the future. It's as bright and clear as possible.
Yeah, no, I just want to stay a little warm and thought it was like,
I love it.
Yeah. It can get a little chilly out in Michigan at times, so this keeps me pretty
imagine so, right? I would imagine so. All right, couple of super chats here. We'll get back and wrap this game up. Actually, you know what? Before that, because we are going to move on to a couple of these guys here specifically on the super chat. So you referenced really the blowout factor and getting back to Brooklyn. Was there anybody else on the Nets that maybe we didn't hit that you just want to reference before we get out of here?
Now, look, I mean, if you don't want to spend it for Jokic and you expect the Clippers on a back-to-back to keep this game competitive, a lot of times we've seen the Nets play down to competition at times. I don't really expect that to happen today. Or unless if these guys popped a ton of bottles on New Year's Eve in New York City, that could definitely have happened. They come out a little hungover. So those things can definitely play a factor. And if you want to take your chances on going to a KD or Harden, and they can outscore Jokic, they have definitely the capability of doing so. But it just seems more likely that Jokic should smash, unlike Harden and KD.
All right, so
other guys on Brooklyn really don't stick out to me. I mean, Nick Claxton, we've seen play 30-plus minutes, but playing he played 30-plus minutes against his Clippers team the other night. He's not so terrible if he's going to catch those lobs from James Harden and get away to a double-double on DK. At $4,900, he's a great Garza pivot, I think, spending up for $600 more. Over there on FanDuel, it's a little tough to go to a $6,200 price tag for Claxton. And $18 on Yahoo. It just seems like I'd rather go to Gafford at that same price tag.
All right, so the other super chat here from Gabriel. I'm sorry, that was the Rudy Gay over Ibaka on FanDuel. Did you see that one?
Yeah. Do you like Gay from Gabriel? Thanks for the super chat. I think with Joe Ingles being back, I just don't think the minutes for Rudy Gay are going to be as likely, but I believe Hassan Whiteside is out for today. So with Hassan Whiteside out, there is a slim chance we might see some Rudy Gay at the 5. So now that I think more about it in a matchup versus Golden State, where Golden State can go small, I don't mind going to Gay over Ibaka whatsoever. I think that's a great way to pivot off of that ownership. Right now, I'll tell you, we have how many points do we have? Rudy Gay coming in at that FanDuel 4K. It's a great tournament option. He's coming in only 11% on FanDuel, I believe, and he's checking in or just sub 10% on DraftKings for $3,600. It's an excellent pivot just because of I think the Hassan Whiteside being out news and the matchup news where the Warriors really don't trot out a true backup center. I mean, it's a mixture of Juan T, Nemanja Bjelica, and I think Gay can easily match up with one of those guys in the backup role. So don't mind that whatsoever. It's something that I've overlooked. So I want to say thank you for bringing that up.
Look at that. See, the chat helping out and reciprocating. We love that. It's a back and forth here. So we'll move to Houston, hosting Denver. 222, that total there, reflecting, I think, what the pacing is. But you referenced this a lot, be it with Joker or just in general for Denver. Down, shorthanded. Talked about Christian Wood a little bit earlier on the Super Chat. Let's start with Jokic. Now you have some time to kind of look at it from his point of view and how much you're getting to him as opposed to looking at him compared to other centers.
Yeah, it's Nikola Jokic. I mean, it wouldn't shock me if we see a 100-point fantasy game out of Nikola Jokic tonight, and I'm not even kidding. I mean, like, this whole team is decimated. Their coaching staff is decimated with COVID. I believe it's David Adelman, who's going to play the the head coach role today. He just enters health and safety protocols, and Nikola Jokic has it in the bag. He can. I wouldn't shock me if it's like a 40-20-10 game out of Nikola Jokic against this Houston team. That's how bad Houston is. And it's he's a priority play and by whatsoever. And you're not going to get a better spot for Nikola Jokic than today. And keep in mind, I believe Aaron Gordon is still questionable. That's an important news because one less body for this Denver team that's been pretty shorthanded is something to keep an eye on. As Monty Morris has also entered health and safety protocols. This is going to just be asked for Facundo Campazzo and Austin Rivers just man all the backcourt minutes for this team. It's just and their bench is pretty thin. If there's no Aaron Gordon, I expect Vlatko Konchar to enter the starting lineup. He entered the starting lineup in a game last week, and he played pretty well. He's another value option if he were to start. That will be kind of low owned. That he might play in the low 20s minutes if there's no Aaron Gordon. Keep an eye on what the coaching staff says about Aaron Gordon coming back from injury. Team just doesn't have bodies. Now, if you don't think Jokic is going to perform well, there's going to be a couple other guys on the Denver team that's going to perform really well against Houston. Will Barton is now the second option on this on this team. He's been taking shot attempts in high teens, mid to high teens, and you're going to like that at $5,800 on FanDuel quite a bit and on DraftKings as well. I really like Will Barton even alongside Jokic just because combined, they're going to take upwards of 50 shot attempts in this game. There's no Aaron Gordon.
Yeah, and I was looking earlier on OddsShopper because of how undermanned they are in Denver, trying to get a little angle on props. And Jokic, I mean, the projections for Jokic are through the roof. And Barton, a couple of strong plays on overs for both assists and rebounds. So that's always a good sign when you're seeing that heavy favorite on props, at least matching up with what you're looking at it here tonight, building lineups. I am curious, though, more so from, I guess, the standpoint.
I'm just going to jump in real quick.
Yeah. Please.
We got some pretty important news in the Clippers team. Luke Kennard has entered health and safety protocols. So please erase whatever I said about Luke Kennard. There is no way he's going to be able to be in your lineups today. So Kennard entering health and safety protocols is one more man down for this Clippers team. And that's just going to ask these guys to play a ton of minutes now. Expect guys like Bledsoe, Amir Coffey, Justice Winslow, get some extra minutes. They have guys like James Ennis and Xavier Moon there. I expect those majority of those minutes to go to guys like Bledsoe and Winslow. So it's going to move a lot of different things for that Clippers rotation. Keep an eye on that starting lineup. That'll be a big indication on who you confidently can project minutes for. And our minutes, our NBA team is constantly changing data on the news. So it might be already updated by the time I finish this. But another important situation, Trey Jones is starting in San Antonio. Okay. That's pretty significant bump for Trey Jones. I think that's going to make him a pretty strong value play for Trey Jones. I expect him now to potentially play low 30s minutes at that price tag. It makes for a pretty exciting value option. So definitely all aboard the Trey Jones ship. So definitely take some chances. He's not the greatest fantasy point per guy, but we're looking for value. And now with all this value, we can jam in a couple of expensive studs tonight.
Yeah, I love that. Especially we had Trey Jones come up earlier, but now as things constantly change and evolve, we have to adapt by all means. All right, so we're back with that Denver-Houston game, the Trey Jones news, the Kennard news, still trying to look at that and handle it. Hopefully nothing else comes out in the next couple of minutes, but if it does, if it's now for the next 18 or the next hour and 18, we have you covered here. And as Rinpack mentioned, our team is constantly updating each and everything. So let's get back to this Denver-Houston game. I know talked a lot about Jokic and some other guys on Denver, especially being shorthanded. We did have a super chat earlier about Christian Wood. So now looking at anything deeper with Houston for you, Rinpack.
For Houston, we've seen Kevin Porter Jr. return, and he's been playing a ton of minutes for this team. He played 35 and 31. Kevin Porter Jr. is not shy to shoot the basketball. He is expensive, but he is a low-owned tournament play where Kevin Porter Jr. has 40-point upside within him. $7,100 on FanDuel makes for a very exciting low-owned option. I know the shot volume's there for him. You'd like him to do other things peripherally wise as well. So I don't mind going to KPJ whatsoever. Important news out of Houston is no Alperen Şengün today. And now in a matchup versus Nikola Jokic, I expect Daniel Theis to enter the rotation again. I'm not sure what his minutes really look like with that situation, but keep in mind that Daniel Theis is there to potentially body those minutes against Jokic. But I think Kevin Porter Jr. probably my favorite play on Houston if you were to roster a Houston Rocket tonight.
Yeah. All right. So real quick, just wanted to get to this super chat from Cheyenne, and we appreciate the super chat. Definitely not necessary, but always a great way to get our attention. We'll get to some questions here as well before we get out of here. We have this game, the one game else as well with Golden State at Utah. Cheyenne, thoughts on Derek Jones Jr. and Derek Walton?
And Derek Walton. I expect Derek Walton to play as many minutes as he can handle for this Detroit team. Derek Jones Jr., I will only have interest in him if Derek Jones Jr. is ruled the starter, even if he was. I just don't think he might end the game with 0 shot attempts. And shot attempts are the best way to really get fantasy points. And he might not even start. It wouldn't shock me to see either Dosunmu, Troy Brown Jr. start over him. Derek Jones Jr., just his minutes have just not been the greatest since he's been back. So if you were to pick one, Derek Walton Jr., but I like Derek Walton Jr. just because of those minutes. It's an interesting play between him and Trey Jones now. We'll see what the ownership projections look like as the data updates leading up to lock. But it wouldn't shock if Trey Jones is going to be projected to be lower owned than Derek Walton. I think I'd be willing to take my chances on Trey Jones over Derek Walton for sure.
So back to Houston, what about Tate or Brooks? Are you looking to get to either of these guys based off of cost?
Based off of cost, Jae'Sean Tate.
Brooks is going to be, I guess, the bigger cost saver here. Tate 5,700 on DK, but just so low owned on the field.
Yeah, we've seen Jae'Sean Tate have 70-point fantasy upside this season, as ridiculous that is. Granted, that team was shorthanded that night, and he just balled out. It's you like that. You would like to see him consistently play 30-plus minutes. We haven't seen that. With Houston just having so many guys back, like a lot of the regular rotation guys back, it just has me shot a little less optimistic about this team, as pricing has really adjusted pretty well. And all these guys are priced either too expensive or too high, just because for these sites don't get time to readjust how their salaries are once these guys are ruled back in from health and safety protocols. So the Houston team, just because they're having a lot of these guys return, they already have returned. It's just not as appealing spot as some other teams like the Clippers or even the Pistons or the Spurs.
All right, make sure you all hit that thumbs up button. We have a lot of eyes on this show, and we are super grateful for you all spending some time here on New Year's Day before this slate locks, just over an hour and 15 minutes really from now. Again, Greg, LaMarca, they're coming your way next and top of this hour here for Live Before Lock. So please hit that thumbs up button. Make sure you're subscribed, of course, and take advantage of what we have here with Prize Picks. Look, we're giving you 1 free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum just for signing up to Prize Picks with that link below. We'll match your first deposit up to $100. You can take everything you're looking at. You can go to Odd Shopper, the 100% free site. Say, all right, what does Alex and all the team have on Awesemo as far as projections? Go over. It's really simple. Play a couple of over-unders. But the beauty of it is if you're new to Prize Picks, then you can take advantage of Awesemo Plus Platinum, get 1 free month, and then start using all of these tools on shows like this, the Deeper Dive, where you can follow along with what Rinpack is breaking down. So it's all encompassing here. It's one big circle of giving back to everybody. It's amazing how that works, my friend. All right, let's hit this final game. Anything else really quick on this Houston Nuggets game?
No, on the Denver side of things, keep an eye with the Aaron Gordon news, because one less body does change a lot when your team is this shorthanded like they are. And that'll open some extra shot attempts to go to guys like Barton. Oh, not that Aaron Gordon's an excessive usage guy since joining this Nuggets team, but it's Jokic and run with Jokic. And I hope to see the triple-digit Jokic fantasy performance game tonight.
You did mention, I know we had a bunch of breaking news stuff to come in there, so I just wanted to go back. You did mention Campazzo, right? Because I know the chat was talking about him, and he was heavy on the field as well.
Yeah, Campazzo is someone with no Monty Morris. I expect Campazzo to play 30-plus minutes. I just don't think the way Campazzo plays, he's a gritty guy, plays like uptight defense, will get up in your grill, but he does facilitate the ball pretty well. It's just a minutes play. If you think Campazzo can play a ton of minutes and craft his way to a couple steals against a bad Houston team, $5,500 on FanDuel is a little too expensive. I think I'd rather find those $500 to go to Reggie Jackson, but Campazzo only $4,200 on DraftKings, much more preferable. Point guard, shooting guard eligible. I don't mind Campazzo there whatsoever, and be willing to even go above the field. And only $10 on Yahoo makes for a great spend down option there.
All right, so final game for us here in the final 10, 12 minutes that we have on the Deeper Dive. Again, make sure you hit that thumbs up, please, if you haven't already. The ratio says a lot of you haven't already, so we don't ask much. And look at all the things we're giving back here, including giving you the opportunity to get right inside Rinpack's brain. That's not something that we should just be giving out for free, yet here we are. Now, this final game, we can start at the top with Steph and just kind of look at how the field is getting to him here based off of that pay up option that you're going to have. And it's not, super, but I'm just curious as far as where you start with Golden State, specifically with Steph. Now, again, 6% as far as ownership on DK, and maybe it's just because of the price in that regard.
Man, yeah, this Golden State team obviously still missing Draymond Green. He's in health and safety protocols, but they do get Jordan Poole to return. So last game, heading into the game, I believe it was on against the Nuggets. I think they played them on Monday or Tuesday. Played them on the 28th. We thought Otto Porter was going to enter the starting lineup. We didn't see Otto Porter enter the starting lineup. They chose. This was the last game without without Jordan Poole. So now I expect Jordan Poole to start today. There was an interview about what he was doing. He was pretty much quarantining in a Boston hotel room for the last 10 days or so since he entered health and safety protocols. With him returning, honestly, they're all too expensive. Well, we got to keep an eye on the starting lineup. The way they played so bad in the first half, who's going to start for the Draymond Green position? I'm not so sure. I would like to see Otto Porter start, and I wouldn't mind going to him. We might even see Juan Toscano-Anderson start there, or Jonathan Kuminga. Kuminga is going to start, sure, but he's not going to take many shots if he's going to start. You would like him to find a way to play mid-20s minutes if he does start. Might be Iguodala as well, and Iguodala is 4K. If you don't roster Golden State Warrior today, I wouldn't fault you. There's just so much other better value, and plus they're getting a guy back, and they're not as shorthanded as some other teams.
It's amazing, though, that I guess maybe surface thinking or quasi-conventional thinking would be that Steph Curry would be bulletproof to all of that around him. But maybe it's the matchup. Is there something specific beyond the outside circumstances that you reference where you wouldn't want to get to Steph? Maybe it is just the 11-8 on DK.
He's expensive, and don't get me wrong, Steph Curry himself can put up 60 real-life points and hit 15 three-pointers for sure. And there might be enough value for us to jam him and Jokic in. And I haven't really built around lineups with all the moving parts yet. But if we're going to get Steph Curry like I believe he's coming in sub 10%.
Yeah, I had him at 6 last projection run here.
Yeah, and if we want to go above the field on a guy like Steph Curry, where I still think he's going to find a way to take almost near 20 shot attempts. He was just shut down against Denver the other night. It's completely fine. If there are ways to jam in him and Jokic, I think I'll find a way to do it. And that's the only Golden State Warrior I really have an interest in. I would like to see Otto Porter start because then we could potentially go to him, but he's too expensive. He's too expensive at $6,300, and I believe he's also priced up on Yahoo at $14 now. There's just so many other better value plays, point per dollar plays, even raw point projected plays than the secondary Golden State options. And sure, does one individual guy like can Wiggins have an upside game? We've seen it happen, but it's a Utah matchup. Utah's on a back-to-back. Curry would be the only guy I think I'd be willing to get above the field on right now, the way things stand.
So looking at the two guys that are getting the most love from an ownership standpoint, at least what we have projected on DK, Gay and Bogdanovich, 3,600, 5,300 respectively, still in that 14 to 13% ownership. So it's not like either are truly dominating. So I'll leave it to you. You know, how are you approaching the Jazz, seeing the field getting to a couple of lower cost guys and also having both Gobert and Mitchell up there at the top?
Yeah, Donovan Mitchell had an excellent game last night against the Minnesota team. I really like going to Gobert as a Jokic pivot, $9,600. Gobert is someone, I think there was a game last year. Gobert put up, I believe, north of 70 fantasy points against Golden State. Granted, things have changed. And he's just playing better defense. He's being able to hold his own. There's times where Gobert was getting played off the court a couple of years ago. A lot of those Houston series with him and Chris Paul would play him off the court, but he's improved defensively. And there's a reason why he's been Defensive Player of the Year, really back-to-back years now. I don't mind going to Gobert. There is definitely, if Jokic has a flat game and Gobert has a ceiling game, especially on FanDuel, 9K for Gobert, it could definitely pan out for you and skip all over that Jokic lineups, especially on FanDuel, $9,000 for Gobert. It's definitely in play. And there's no Hassan Whiteside today. So we might see the Gobert shifts, rotational shifts, be potentially a little longer with no Hassan Whiteside there. Eric Pascal continues to be out with a personal issue. So those minutes for Gobert could be high 30s yet again. And the way Quinn Snyder handles his blowouts, not to say this game is going to get blown out, it's a 4-point line, but he lets these starters get extended run deep into the blowout.
On FanDuel, we talked about pivoting away from Jokic, and earlier it was about cost-saving pivots. It's not a gigantic cost save by any means, 9K on FanDuel, but as far as the value of what you can get from a point standpoint, sounds like Gobert may be the best pivot away on FanDuel from Jokic.
Yeah, the way things stand right now, yeah, I think that's definitely a pretty nice pivot, and I have no issues if you are a daring tournament player. I think it's a fine option to do. You're going to get Gobert much significantly lower ownership, but know the opportunity cost of Jokic's ceiling. And if Jokic does have that super ceiling performance where it can definitely happen against Houston, your night's pretty much done.
Lemons 50 with the super chat. I hope he's wrong, only because I jumped in early plus money on Alabama, but go Dogs.
My Wolverines did not show up last night. It was a disappointing game.
What happened?
It was just I knew Georgia's a much superior team than this. There was many parts in the season that Michigan definitely did overachieve. There were a lot of, I felt like, trap games they could have lost, but it's really cool to see them make it that far. There's a bright future ahead of us where we're gonna miss those three guys going to the NFL. Whoever gets Aiden Hutchinson, he's a stud, and Dax Hill will find his way into the league, and David Ojabo is going to be really good as well. But Georgia's name there, Georgia-Alabama rematch is something that the college football fans deserve to see. As a Michigan fan, I was definitely upset New Year's Eve was not too kind.
I can't imagine. I'm just mad at Ben Rasa on the Odd Shopper betting show talking me into taking Michigan with the points and the money line on a half unit. But
Yeah,
he's given me so many winners. I can't hold a grudge.
It was a rough game. I mean, it just felt like Cade McNamara played. He's like been an excellent game manager all season long. Turnovers, running backs didn't really fumble the ball all season long, fumbling the ball. And Georgia just played a better game. They whooped us, and it's just the fact. And they were great.
Tough one. AGAM on the chat, and this is interesting because we talked about this scenario on FanDuel. What about on Yahoo? Gobert or Jokic? Can you use that same line of thinking with Gobert as that pivot on Yahoo, like we talked about on FanDuel?
So Jokic is $56. There's a lot of value that's opened up where we can find a way to get him in. The field is definitely going there. We have him right now at like a projected 45% ownership on Yahoo. It wouldn't shock me if it even goes up. There are ways to jam in both because there's that much value. But I do think with so much value on Yahoo, especially with the $10 plays being so strong, I don't think it's that necessary in Yahoo. And Gobert is priced pretty much at his the most expensive we've seen him on Yahoo at $39. He's yet to cross $40 on Yahoo, but he's going to cross it very soon.
Awesome. All right. So I did want to ask something, and the chat was talking a little bit about it earlier, kind of throughout our conversation. If you were looking, and I know that things haven't been officially built for you yet, and we can keep it to one site, that's fine on DK. But if you were looking at two of the pay up options tonight, building lineups with Jokic or Harden or Jokic or Steph, where do you think you're landing the most as far as guys that are super high pay up options that you could match two players on the same lineup, majority of building, let's say, multiple lineups?
Let me take a look real quick. I mean, guys who have obviously James Harden, we know what that upside is for James Harden. There's no issues if you want to go Jokic, Harden. He's been great since he's returned from health and safety protocols, has triple-double upside, and there's even a chance he can outscore Jokic straight up. Now, in a situation that we have presented so much value has opened up since we've started the show, it's pretty much a brand new slate. It's going to be a different slate by the time lock comes around. It's just how things have evolved so far in the NBA season. But I think it makes a lot of sense to go. I think Harden Jokic is fine. I don't even mind doing Durant Jokic. One of those Brooklyn guys can have that ceiling performance. And that being said, these are all projection based, what just quickly throwing out there. But I think that's going to make it very appealing to go to a Steph Curry Jokic build because it's going to be very low owned, I think, just because of all the value that's opened up. People are going to target that ceiling triple-double upside with Harden. Durant obviously has just raw fantasy point outscore. It's just like him just naturally getting there. And the mid-tier it's not as strong as it is on other slates. I mean, Detroit has those mid-range guys and guys like Diallo and Bay who have 40, 50-point upside. We saw it the last game. So it might not be super necessary to go double stud. It might be Jokic, some value, and then mid-tier across the board, which makes for a very exciting tournament slate just because there's a lot of different ways to reach that upside tonight.
Awesome. At Rinpack, as you already know, on Twitter, make sure you thank this man for not only spending some time with you this past hour as we got to look at this slate, this ever-evolving slate. The good news is that Greg and Matt are coming your way right now for Live Before Lock. Please hit that thumbs up button if you haven't already. We're out, but the chat, everybody else, you're not going anywhere. We'll get you ready. One more hour of content here. My friend, it's always a pleasure. That coat is a power piece of clothing that you have, man. So when you break the slate tonight, just remember where you heard it here first. Appreciate you, brother, big time.
Good luck, everyone. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Thanks to Tyler for producing. We'll see you, but don't go anywhere.
The Awesemo NBA Live Before Lock, first NBA Live Before Lock of 2022, and nobody that I'd rather be ringing in the new year with than Action Matt LaMarca here. And we've got a pretty interesting slate, smaller slate for a Saturday, only 5 games, but as usual in this day and age in NBA, lots of moving parts. Show is sponsored by PrizePicks. Do us a favor, guys, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. But first, and most importantly, Matt, what's going on? How you doing, man?
Happy New Year, Greg. Happy New Year, everyone out there. I'm good. You know, nothing really changes for me on New Year's Day. I'm still working, still grinding. So excited to get into some of these contests and hopefully make a little cash, ring in the new year right.
I mean, what's more exciting than you start the new year? You look at the pricing, you look at the projected ownership. It's like, oh, all right. Hamadou Diallo is $7,700 in chalk on DraftKings. On FanDuel, he's $6,800 and projected for over 55% ownership. Hamadou Diallo 3 weeks ago wasn't in the Pistons rotation, and now he's just the stone cold chalk on a slate as one of the most expensive players. That's what happens when teams are shorthanded and things change. As for players that are currently on the injury report, they're waiting for news on. Not too many big names, but some that are still going to be significant because we've got Aaron Gordon. He's questionable for Denver. We've got Keita Bates-Diop questionable. Austin Rivers also questionable for Denver. Vlatko Cancar is questionable for Denver. The Nuggets may be really, really shorthanded today, which is going to bring up some interesting talking points. Anything that catches your eye that you want to mention about this slate? No pressure. If there's nothing, it's not a big deal. But anything you want to point out before we start talking about position by position?
The big stuff I feel like we've gotten, right? We got Brandon Ingram, Josh Hart out in. We've got, the news on DeJounte Murray that he's not going to return, even though he's technically been cleared from health and safety. So, I do think that we've gotten most of what we need. We're kind of just waiting, like you said, on the Nuggets, but that doesn't mean that it's necessarily like an easy slate to dissect.
Did I miss something? Somebody in chat was saying that Keita Bates-Diop was already ruled out. Is that, let's see, Bates-Diop?
I'm just seeing questionable on him.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he's questionable. Looking. So here's the most recent tweet that I found from a Spurs beat reporter. DeJounte Murray and Lonnie Walker have joined DeJounte Murray and Devontae Cacok in health and safety protocols. Keita Bates-Diop hamstring tightness and Drew Eubanks back tightness questionable to play today. So as far as I know, both of them are questionable. I haven't seen anything that he's been let's see. Did Underdog tweet that he was out? Let's see.
I wouldn't know.
Let's see. Has he been ruled out? This is the thrilling stuff. Trying to find the. So I see Trey Jones is starting. I can't find a source that says that he's officially out. At 5:37, he was ruled out. Okay, all right. He's been ruled out. So there we go. News got posted it in Discord. I missed it. Here's what's really exciting about NBA slates at this time of year. You get somebody like Keita Bates-Diop ruled out. It shouldn't matter, but it kind of really does at this point of the season because of how shorthanded some of these teams are. But let's just start talking about some of the guards here. And I want to ask you about Hamadou Diallo because he's picking up so much ownership today. And there's certainly some sticker shock here. I'm not anywhere near the ownership that the field's on him right now. 7,700 on DK, nearly 40% ownership. Talked about it before, 6,800, 55% ownership. He's in my player pool, but I have a fraction of what the field has. Am I wrong to be lighter on Hamadou Diallo? It seems a little crazy to me at this price and ownership.
I mean, it does sound that way, right? You're talking about a guy who's almost 8K who has been out of the rotation at times this year, but he's a fantasy point per minute guy and he's playing close to 40 minutes right now. So it's a good matchup against the Spurs. The Spurs have played at one of the faster paces in the league. This is a game that maybe the Pistons can keep competitive. And Diallo has shown that he can put up a ceiling even at this price tag, right? He's just coming off 61 and a quarter in his last game. So I have Diallo. I'm pretty close to the field. I don't think I have 40%, but I probably have about a third Diallo at the moment. It's just hard to see a lot of paths where he busts, barring like foul trouble.
I mean, I can see paths where he busts. He's really expensive and he's
fantasy
still...
point per minute, Greg.
sure, he's a fantasy point per minute, but then you start to like, how many minutes do we think he plays? I have him for 38. No issue with that, right? 38 minutes at around a fantasy point per minute. That still doesn't necessarily mean that he's worth being 7,700 on DraftKings, in my opinion. So here's how a lot of my lineups are looking on this slate as well. Stars and scrubs. I have a lot of exposure to Jokic. I have a lot of exposure to Harden, getting exposure to Kevin Durant as well. And then there's just a bunch of really shitty players that I don't normally roster that end up being like a Cassius Stanley is in my lineups today. I've got exposure to Luka Garza, Rudy Gay. I have Nuggets guys just as placeholders right now that I'm going to end up, I assume, getting to more of these guys via late swap when we get more news that comes out, because there are players right now that I don't think look exceptional, like a JaMychal Green. But JaMychal Green could have to end up being forced to play significant minutes if Aaron Gordon and a couple other Denver guys get ruled out. So I'm just finding it pretty easy to get up to the likes of James Harden, Nikola Jokic, and it's a little prohibitive for me if I roster a lot of Hamadou Diallo at that price point.
That's fair. If you're going to stack Jokic and Harden, or, one of those two guys with Durant, it really doesn't leave very much room for you to have a, 8K player. So I get that. I'm selling James Harden at this price tag, I think.
I just like and by the way, I don't think that's unreasonable or anything, but I do like the idea of like, hey, sell James Harden at 11.3, buy Hamadou Diallo buy Hamadou Diallo at 7,700. So James Harden actually 11.5 on DK, 11.3 on FanDuel. So James Harden, I don't have him projected as the best play on the slate points per dollar. Far from it. I just have the salary to get to him in a lot of lineups. So I end up slightly overweight to the field because of the amount of value today. And, ultimately to me, it's like, do I want to pay an overpriced James Harden at 11.5? Or do I want to play an overpriced Sadiq Bey at 11.2? I mean, not 11.2, 8.2, or an overpriced Hamadou Diallo at 7.7. I have more exposure to James Harden than any of those guys, but tell me why you're lighter on him.
I hear you. The question is, do you want to go full on stars and scrubs? Or do you want to go one star and then a little bit more of a balanced build around it? And I find myself liking some of these guys in the mid-range, speaking about guards, Derek White is somebody at 7K that I have quite a bunch of tonight, right? You have Diallo, you have Sadiq Bey, you have Will Barton at 6,200. You guys like Kobe White, Jalen Green, I think are fine. So I just have myself not going for the full on, we're going to load up two 12K players and then we're going to surround it with the punts. I have some of those, but a lot of my lineups are a little bit more balanced than that.
Yep. I am part of it also, though, is like, how are you handling the Denver Nuggets situation? Because I do think this is an interesting talking point from the slate. Just to reiterate from before, we have, and I've double checked this one. This is not a Keita Bates job where I missed that he was ruled out, 30 minutes ago. But we've got Aaron Gordon, Austin Rivers, and Vlatko Kinkar all listed as questionable. If we get even one of these guys ruled out, so much value opens up on Denver just because they're already so shorthanded. The only players we know that are on the team that are in for real today, Nikola Jokic, Will Barton, Facundo Campazzo, JaMychal Green, Peter Canelli, don't know who that is, Carlick Jones, and Bol Bol. Right? This is not the deepest of and Devon Reed. So this is not the deepest of rosters right now. Jokic clearly the top spend up option on the slate. But what are you doing when you approach some of these teams where it's already, or the Denver Nuggets, where they're already shorthanded and they could be even more handicapped if some of these guys get ruled out?
You have to love Denver tonight. I mean, it'd be one thing if they were shorthanded in a normal spot, but they're shorthanded against the Rockets. The Rockets are just the giving tree of fantasy points. They play at one of the fastest paces in the league, and they're the second worst team in terms of defensive efficiency. So you have to have interest in some of these, fill-in type guys. You mentioned JaMychal Green. I think he's very interesting. He's, averaged around a fantasy point per minute this season. So giving him, extended minutes would make him a really nice value. But for me, Jokic, Barton, Campazzo, those guys that we know for sure are in, they are core plays on this slate.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. And then other guys too, like I said, that I have JaMychal Green. If all these guys play, I'm not really going to like JaMychal Green that much, but I want him
Right.
as a placeholder just so I get exposure to him in case some of these guys get rolled out and I have a little bit of flexibility to late swap, particularly these guys become game time decisions because that game starts in an hour and 45 minutes. It's a smaller slate and a lot of the games start earlier. It's the second to last start time of the day. And I do want to have some of that flexibility available to me. So getting back to some of the other guards, and we've done our talk about Hamadou Diallo. What about some of the other Detroit guards? Because there are cheaper players from the Pistons that are going to have to play extended minutes due to all of the guys that are out for the Pistons. So reading out their injury report right now for the Pistons, we have, but this could take the rest of the show reading their injury report.
Yeah.
Killian Hayes, Corey Joseph, Rodney McGruder, Trey Lyles, Kelly Olynyk, Isaiah Stewart, Chris Smith, Frank Jackson, Jeremy Grant, Isaiah Livers, Cade Cunningham, Saban Lee, Josh Jackson are all ruled out today. This opens up a lot of usage and just overall playing time in the Pistons roster. There's a reason why Hamadou Diallo is chalk at 7,700. It's not because he all of a sudden became worthy of a 7,700 price tag in a normal situation. It's because all of these guys are out. But which of the cheaper players in the backcourt are you looking to get to from Detroit?
Flip a coin. I mean, I haven't heard of any of these guys until like 4 days ago, right? You got Derek Walton Jr. He's played at least 31 minutes in the last couple of games, so he makes sense at 4,500, I suppose. Cassius Stanley, as you alluded to earlier, is expected to play decent minutes. He had 27 and a half in their last game. He's priced at the minimum, so he's fine. It wouldn't shock me if he got to 30 minutes today. I think Walton and Stanley are the two that you want to really focus in on the most, but I do wonder like what the best case scenario is for those guys, right? And you're not looking for all that much at 3K and 4,500 respectively, right? But can Cassius Stanley get us 25? Can Derek Walton Jr. get us 30? We're kind of taking flyers here on guys that we have no track record of, no sample size. We don't know.
So here's what I think the best case scenario for these guys are. I don't expect Cassius Stanley to go out and score 40 DraftKings points or anything like that, or 35 FanDuel points. But here's what I think is the best case scenario for him. He goes out, he scores something like mid-20s fantasy points, and you get Nikola Jokic and James Harden, Kevin Durant. Two of those three score 60 plus, and you just need them in your lineups. So I'm looking at Cassius Stanley not in terms of, oh, look, I think this guy's the greatest fantasy producer in the world. It's, can I get a salvageable game from him that's going to allow me to pay up for the stars so that I don't have to roster a ton of like Sadiq Bey and Hamadou Diallo today? That to me is the best case scenario for a Cassius Stanley, is that he enables me to pay up for stars with a lot of upside.
Yeah, and that's a fair point. The only thing I would push back on is you said if Harden, Durant, Jokic, if two of them get to 60, I think you would need two of them to get to 70 for it to not matter what Stanley does. You would need if you're saying I can survive with 24 points from Stanley, then I think you need like 150 from your two studs.
Maybe. I mean, I think that I still think a lot of these slates, just the raw points matter more than anything else, because we've seen just there's so many cheap guys. Like you said, we're playing guys we've never heard of. That's every night now in NBA. There are guys checking into the game. It's like, oh, I've never heard of this guy. Then look him on. It's like, oh, and I have exposure to him. And then all of a sudden I'm rooting for him when I'm watching games on the on League Pass. So I do think the raw points at the top matter more than the actual points per dollar. So I'm not really concerned. Like, obviously, if I get 45 fantasy points or something like that at James Harden, that would be less than ideal. But I still think from these guys, as long as you get an okay game from Cassius Stanley, then I'm just looking for the stars to have, decent enough fantasy performances. And I think the most likely outcome is the optimal lineup today has two of the three all-star players on it.
It's a fair debate, right? Because you're saying and I think stars and scrubs is almost always the correct answer. So I have no problems with what you're saying. My thing is like we're playing guys that we have no idea who they are at 3K, but I can get Kobe White at 4,900, and I think Kobe White can get us 40 plus. He's done that in 2 games in a row. Right. So is it better to sacrifice a little bit off the top to come up a little bit from the bottom. You're saying you'd rather have the top, and I think that's totally reasonable. I think just for me personally, I prefer having a little bit more upside with my value plays tonight.
Yeah, and I mean, we could talk about Coby White here, also 6,200 over on FanDuel. DraftKings, a much cheaper price point where he is 4,900 off the top of my head. Coby White, 4,900. So he's somebody who's, it's a smaller slate. So it's not like you're finding contrarian options who are like 4% owned that you're looking to roster. But, Coby White, as you said, has proven upside over the last few slates. He is projected for less than 20% ownership. So it's very reasonable to me to get exposure to Coby White. I have him in my player pool, although not that much different than the field right now. But what are some of the things that stand out to you about Coby White? Is it just that it puts you on a little bit of a different build, or you just think he replicates some of his recent box scores?
I think he can do that. I mean, if you look at his recent game logs, it's not like he's been shooting the lights out. He was a little bit fluky in his last game. There's no doubt about it. But I think if you look at 2 nights ago, he played 35 minutes. He had 12 assists, probably a little bit fluky there. But anyway, just the Lonzo Ball, I think, forces him into that, 30 plus minute role. And we didn't get to see the best of Coby White early this season, but, last year or 2 years ago, his rookie year down the stretch, he proved that he's a legit scorer, like primary off the bench guy, in my opinion. So, playing next to DeRozan, Levine, Nikola Vucevic, he doesn't have to do all that much, but I do think that his fantasy upside on a per minute basis is probably over a point per minute, like upside wise. And so getting a guy playing 30 plus minutes at sub 5K, I think is very appealing against the Wizards.
We do have some super chats here to get to, and I think everything you said about Coby White is really reasonable. Scrolling back, we did have somebody who got banned from chat, just a wall of text who buried some of our super chats. Shame on you. I forget who that guy was, but first from Aiden Queskin, Walton and Mann or Morris and Campazzo. Morris, which I assume, so Marcus Morris and Facundo Campazzo or Walton and Mann. That is Morris and Campazzo for me. How about you?
Easily for me, that one.
Next super chat here from Papa Rakes. Thank you guys for all of the super chats. This one just saying, built my first optimizer using your data. The journey is real. Thank you, Team Awesemo. Thank you for signing up. And also anybody, if you sign up, have any, or even if you've been a customer member of for a while, if you have any questions about any of the tools on the site or how to use Fantasy Crunch or anything in there, DM me on Twitter and I could help show you some of the stuff. We also have a lot of good tutorial videos. I know that Alex has done some and Josh has made some tutorials as well. All stuff that's really helpful. Let's see. Have I caught up with the rest of the super chats? I believe so. All right. So somebody else who I want to ask you about, because I know this is going to come up in chat. People are probably asking questions about him. A little before we started, Trey Jones was named the starting point guard for the San Antonio Spurs. Now we look at the backcourt and who's available for the Spurs today. They have Derek White. They have Trey Jones, who's starting at point guard. They have Bryn Forbes. And they have Joshua Primo. That's basically all the guards they have available. So I have to expect somewhat, and I guess Devin Vassell could play backup guard minutes as well, but I have to expect that Trey Jones is going to play at least fairly significant minutes in this spot. We don't have that much data on him as an NBA player. When he's been on the court, looking at his per minute rate so far this year, he is playing 12 minutes per game, averaging 10.17 DraftKings points. Not awful per minute production.
No, it's pretty good.
Do you think we could see big minutes out of Trey Jones? Because that would put him ahead of guys like Cassius Stanley and some of the other crappy, cheap options, just based on what we've seen from Trey Jones when he's been on the court this year.
I think I have him clearly ahead of those guys as is. I think 25 minutes is a reasonable projection. We have him projected for 25.6 minutes. It wouldn't shock me if it's slightly higher than that, if he gets closer to 30. But I think Trey Jones is a legitimate NBA player. He is somebody who has been in the rotation on the roster for the Spurs all year. I had to look up Derek. I can't even remember his name. Is it Derek Jones? The Detroit guy. He's been in Lithuania. He's been in the G League. I feel much better rostering Trey Jones than I do some of these Pistons guys.
Yeah, we've got some of the Pistons guys: Derek Walton Jr., Cassius Stanley.
That's him.
Yeah. Also, and then you go deeper into the Pistons bench guys they have available today. It's we've got Trayvon Palmer, Devitis Servidis. We've got Jamorko Pick. Just household names littering the tail end of this Pistons bench. But yeah, I think now that he's starting Trey Jones, and I'm just trying to figure out some of the minutes here for the Spurs, even being conservative with his playing time, I think he's my favorite value play on the entire slate.
I think that's fair. I would probably give an edge to Campazzo, but factoring in ownership and stuff, it'll be interesting to see. Right now, we only have Jones projected for 17% ownership. It will be interesting to see how much that rises here before a lineup lock. If he becomes, mega chalk, it would be that'll be an interesting situation, right? Because then I don't know what you do with Trey Jones. I still think you probably play him, but for me, it's Campazzo. I'll pay a little bit extra just because I think, again, the high end production that I can get is a little more.
All right, I'm refreshing the ownership page, and we'll see what it looks like right now. There was an update from 2 minutes ago. We currently have Trey Jones is projected for 36% ownership on DK. Okay. On FanDuel, he is projected for 26% ownership at 3,700. I don't think those are unreasonable numbers considering his price and potential role.
Those are fair for sure. I mean, again, certainly him over Cassius Stanley at 3,000.
Is there anybody on the Spurs bench as a guard that you would see as a potential pivot off of him? Because once again, it is Greg Popovich. We can see this situation where we've seen him do it before. A game starts, we're 3 minutes in, the team's down 4-0. He's like, all right, hockey line change. We're going with totally different guys. I'm personally going to be rolling with Trey Jones, but do you see any reason to maybe go with somebody like a Bryn Forbes that the field isn't getting to?
No, I really, Bryn Forbes, we know he can shoot the ball, but if you play Bryn Forbes, you're hoping that he hits like 5 or 6 3-pointers. I don't want to play that game. So I don't think that you need to necessarily dive into this wasteland, considering all the other potential spots we have to exploit.
We have a super chat here from Justin Cravens, but there's no question there. So I don't know, Justin, if you meant to ask a question or not. Appreciate the super chat either way. Leave a question. Oh, actually, it just looks like he did leave a follow-up. This looks like for you here, he just says, Happy New Year's, Big Saxy. So I assume that is directed towards you. It was not left in the super chat, but underneath there. If you have a question, also follow up, leave that in the YouTube chat and I'll answer that. Another super chat here from Corey Bomber. Harden and Tice or Derek White and Kevin Porter Jr. for DK. All right, so this is tricky because I like Harden. I like Derek White. I don't like Daniel Tice. I don't like Kevin Porter Jr. I think there are a ton of value options that are better to look at for today's slate than Daniel Tice. So my feeling is you want to go with Harden and Tice, but just play a different value guy than Tice.
That's very fair. Don't play Daniel Tice, I think is the big lesson to be taken away out of this.
And don't play Kevin Porter Jr. either, given the outlook of this slate, at least for, DraftKings. We've got Kevin Porter Jr. at 8,000 on DK. Yeah. I get he's not picking up ownership, but I don't have him projected particularly well. 7,100 on FanDuel. That's more of a playable price tag for Kevin Porter Jr. But once again, it's a DK related question, but I don't have any interest in Kevin Porter Jr. at 8,000 on DK. Do you?
No. And it's a shame. I do like Kevin Porter Jr., but AK is too much. And also, Happy New Year, Justin Cravens. Justin Cravens is a good dude.
Oh, is he a friend?
He's a friend from the DK Sims. He works at a bat company.
Oh, and, I didn't realize you knew his whole resume.
Yeah, he made me a customized, personalized bat.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Like baseball bat?
Yeah.
Or like bat?
No, baseball
Batman.
bat.
Pretty cool. At other guards, we didn't talk about Derek White. He's going to be really popular today, all for good reason. To me, he's reasonably priced on FanDuel and DraftKings. As long as DeJounte Murray is out, Derek White's going to have to do almost everything for this team. Some recent games for Derek White have been marred by blowouts. He only played 24 minutes yesterday. The game was not remotely close. Game against the Jazz, was also, that one was more competitive. He ended up scoring 43.5 DraftKings points. The game before against the Pistons, we know how bad the Pistons are given some of the players that we were rattling off talking about them before. They ended up winning that game by 1,000,000 points. So Derek White only played 16 minutes, scored 26 DraftKings points. I don't read too much into the minutes in those games because they were just a lot of not competitive games. Derek White, is he somebody you're also going to be getting to at a good clip?
He's my highest owned guard outside of Campazzo. It's too cheap of a price tag for the Spurs' current situation. 1.17 DraftKings points per minute over the past month. Like you said, as long as this game doesn't blow out, and I get it, the Pistons are bad, but it's not like the Spurs are world beaters, right? We can't be playing around the Spurs blowout narrative. I just don't think that's a real thing. So as long as he gets his 33 minutes or so, I expect him to get into the 40 plus range and possibly have upside for more in a good matchup.
Yeah, and just pulling up some of the on-off court numbers for him when there is no DeJounte Murray on the court this year. I just want to make sure I have all of the exact correct numbers when I'm reading them off, just for, kind of a good overview of what we could expect from Derek White. But so Derek White averages over a fantasy point per minute this year when there is no DeJounte Murray on the court, 1.08 fantasy points. And realistically, in a competitive game, he's playing like 36 to 38 minutes. They just haven't played competitive games as of late. And, you play a team like the Pistons with nobody available, you're going to win by 40 points from time to time. So I look at the game today, though, it's a 4.5 point spread. They're also on the road in Detroit. So I wouldn't look at the last game against Pistons and just say, oh, the Spurs are going to win by 40 again. I don't think it's the most likely outcome. It's only a 4.5 point spread. And if you assume blowout risk in that game, well, then you have to assume blowout risk in basically every other game on the slate, because all the other games other than Chicago, Washington have a spread of 4.5 or greater. Looking at the other guards on the slate, anybody that we have not yet talked about that's going to be a key part of your build?
I don't think key part of my build. I will have some of these Clippers guys. The Clippers are a team that is also a bit shorthanded. They're playing on the second leg of a back-to-back, which is kind of an interesting spot because you've got some older players. You've got guys who have been out of the lineup due to COVID. So how hard do they want to push these guys 2 nights in a row? It'll be interesting to see, but I do think that, an Eric Bledsoe, a Terrence Mann, like I'll have some of those guys as well.
Yeah, and there's nobody else we haven't talked about that's a key part of my builds. As for the Clippers guys, though, I'm going to get to more of them if all the Denver guys end up playing. Because right now I have a lot of Will Barton in my builds. I have a lot of Campazzo, just like you do. But the amount of those guys will go down if those other Denver guys end up playing. And then I'll probably end up pivoting onto more of the Clippers guys. But right now I'm holding the Denver guys more so as placeholders. Let's see. Anything else that we missed? I don't think so. I think everything that is important to me we've discussed so far, and pretty much all the chalk plays at guard we've hit on so far. Today's show is sponsored by Prize Picks. If you guys are not familiar with Prize Picks, do yourself a favor. Head on over to Prize Picks, sign up using the promo code Awesemo, get up to $100 bonus on your first deposit. And we have a lot of really good tools over at Awesemo.com that could help you build some lineups over at Prize Picks. Also, if you sign up for the first time and use our promo code, you do get 1 free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. And that comes with all our tools for FanDuel, DraftKings to help you build lineups there. If you look at Prize Picks, they do have fantasy point over-unders. It's the same scoring as FanDuel, so you can compare some of those to our FanDuel projections over on Awesemo.com. Also, the props that are over on Prize Picks, really useful to use Odd Shopper, where you can look at Odd Shopper, use some of the projections we have there, percentage odds of players hitting over-under on the props, compare those to the Prize Pick odds, and you can build some good prop cards. Something that Matt and I are going to be doing in the last 30 minutes of the show. So from 7 o'clock to 7:30, even though the main slate is locked, Matt and I are going to be sticking around, answering questions, watching the games, tilting, most importantly, whatever ends up happening. We've had some good tilts on the show, and we did them together. Remember Josh Hart night? That was a good one. There's been...
Always lets me down.
Oh,
yeah. Always lets me down when I tout him on this program. Other than that, he smashes.
Yeah, but there is no Josh Hart on the main slate today. He's playing in the 6:30 game that just started. So we don't have to worry about that today, but stick around with us for the last 30 minutes after lock. And if nothing else, there's a really good chance that we're going to get lineup news for the Denver Nuggets in that last 30 minutes. So we're going to be breaking that down from a FanDuel DraftKings perspective and find out who is in or out for the Denver Nuggets. So a little bit of something for everybody. All right, let's move on over to the forwards. And to me, Saddiq Bey is kind of the Hamadou Diallo of the front court. So we've got Diallo, who's much more expensive and much more popular than we normally see at his price point. And the same goes for Saddiq Bey, who is currently projected for 28% ownership at 8,200 on DraftKings. Over on FanDuel, Saddiq Bey is 6,700, a more reasonable price point, but still a very high 45% projected ownership. I view Saddiq Bey personally very similar to how I view Hamadou Diallo. He's in my player pool, but I think he's a little bit too expensive, a little bit too much ownership. I'm underweight to the field on him. How are you handling Saddiq Bey?
I have less Bey than I do Diallo, just because I think Diallo is the better per minute player. Maybe Saddiq Bey gets a few extra minutes. I mean, we've seen him creep into the 43 range recently, but Saddiq Bey, I think you can pretty comfortably say his upside is capped at around 50. Hamadou Diallo, again, as just proven to us in his last game, can get us 60. And do I expect 60 from him? No, but I think it's within his range of outcomes, and I don't think it is for Bey. So I'm much more taking the Diallo side than the Bey side in this matchup.
I also do have slightly more exposure to Hamadou Diallo, but once again, I'm underweight to both of them. And I'm going to be rooting against these guys today. And then watch, it'll be one of my, 10% of lineups with Hamadou Diallo or Bey will end up being the nuts night, and then I'll be rooting for them at the end of the night. But at least as of now, I anticipate that I'm going to be rooting against some of these Pistons guys today, other than the crappy ones that I'm rostering that I don't want to be rostering. But Saddiq Bey, I just view him very similarly to how I talked about Hamadou Diallo before. A little bit overpriced, a little bit too much ownership for me. And there's cheap guys that I want to get to at the forward spot, in particular Devin Vassell, David Nwaba. Those are two value plays that are really standing out to me as of now. JaMychal Green, somebody we talked about before. If players get ruled out for Denver, I have him in as a placeholder right now. I'm going to be getting less of them if these Denver guys get ruled in. If guys get ruled out, I'm going to try to get to as much as JaMychal Green as possible. What are the forward values that you like the most today?
Yeah, I would say that the Spurs are the most interesting team at forward. I felt like Devin Vassell was in a great spot yesterday, and then he ended up only playing 20 minutes. But you would think with no Bates job, he should get a little bit of progression in that department. But you never know with Pop, right? Maybe it'll be he'll dust off Thaddeus Young or something. You never know with him. He's a pure wild card. So I do have Vassell. I think he's one of the better pure values, but I'm a little bit underweight, I think, compared to the field. You mentioned Nwaba. I like him quite a bit. He's been playing, again, he's a fantasy point per minute type of guy. And if you're a fantasy point per minute type of guy, you're going to be somebody that I like. I really like those rate stats. Those are really the two that stand out to me. I had some Rudy Gay earlier in the day, but with them sort of now at full strength, I don't know what the minutes are going to look like. If he doesn't get to that 25-minute range, if he drops back more to that 18 to 20-minute range, I think he will likely not possess enough ceiling for me at 3,600.
Yeah, I played a lot of Rudy Gay last night after Joe Ingles got ruled out. It's a different situation for me today. That, and we have a lot of cheap options to choose from. Piece of news that just came in: Aaron Gordon is on track to play Saturday. So,
okay.
On track to play. Always weird coach speak. Is that anything definitive? No, but at least as of now, if you're asking me, does Aaron Gordon play or not play? I would now say that I expect that he is going to play. How does that impact how you view guys on Denver?
It doesn't change my feelings on the core guys at all. I think you can still very comfortably go with Jokic, go with Barton, and go with Campazzo. It more cuts into that second range of guys, the JaMychal Greens, the Devin Reeds, that tier of player.
Yeah, I think it definitely is going to inhibit the amount that I'm going to get to JaMychal Green, because I thought he was somebody who I was going to be able to late swap on or get to more of, and we were just talking about him a second ago. Potentially to be able to get him at really low ownership and potentially playing a bigger role. That gets muted a little bit with Aaron Gordon. And we do have Austin Rivers still remains questionable. Here are some questions we got in our Discord channel they want to go over. From Jets World, he asked Kelden Johnson or Marcus Morris. I prefer Kelden Johnson today. How about you?
See, this one's really tough for me. If it wasn't a back-to-back, this would be Marcus Morris for me very easily. But again, Marcus Morris, older player, just returned to the lineup back-to-back as a big underdog. I don't know how comfortable I feel with his workload tonight. I still think Momo is a great play right now. We have him projected for 17% ownership compared to 30 for Johnson. But I feel a little bit safer with Kelden Johnson. So if you're looking for the upside shot, the ownership play, I think Morris is better. If you're looking for just the safer source of fantasy points, Kelden Johnson.
Yeah, I have more exposure to Kelden Johnson today personally, so that is going to be my answer. Question here from JEW. Last one in DK single entries, Harden or Curry. We didn't really talk about Curry much before. The matchup against the Utah Jazz is pretty difficult. I'm not going to say he's unplayable with the amount of value there is on the slate, but at least for DraftKings, I certainly prefer James Harden to Steph Curry. How about you?
I feel like I have to say James Harden. I don't want to say James Harden, to be honest. Like, I feel like you're buying high on James Harden. I want to say that I want to buy low on Steph Curry, but the problem is that the price hasn't come down like at all. The production hasn't been there, and he's still almost 12K. You know, he had 33 and a half fantasy points in his last game, and his salary went up $300. So I want to play Steph Curry. You know, the bounce back's coming soon, but there's not a lot of wiggle room in that price tag. So Harden.
Yeah, and the other thing with Harden too is, have you noticed the free throws as of late? The change in free throw shooting rules is gone in the trash. Refs are not calling it to the new rules anymore. Those things are long gone. James Harden now has a free throw rate that's just astronomically high. The concerns about him shooting free throws were very real at the start of the season. It is not at all a coincidence to me that the rules of lax free throw shooting is back up in the NBA, as is James Harden's production. Now, obviously, there's also a little bit of an overlap there where James Harden had some big games as of late with Kevin Durant out. But even with Kevin Durant in, I think we could feel better about James Harden just from the standpoint of he's getting the free throw line again. And it's not even because he's doing anything different. It's just the refs are calling the games differently now than they were at the start of the year. And it's more in line with what they did in previous years.
That's interesting. I haven't really looked into those free throw rate stuff. I mean, I've noticed it on Harden, but if the free throw rates are, in general, league-wide are getting back up, it's probably time to start hopping on the over train.
Yeah, over the last month, the free throw rate's just basically exactly the same as what it was last year. Whereas at the start of the season, it was down dramatically. I don't know what the numbers are off the top of my head, but I was reading about it earlier, and it's basically however the refs were calling the games last year, exact same this year. The new rules have gone in the trash, and I think a lot of it's because the players were unhappy with it, so they just reverted back. Question here from Bill W. He was asking Amir Coffey versus Trey Jones to Kuzma versus Diallo DK. Okay, I see. So one lineup combination is Amir Coffey and Trey Jones. The other one is Kuzma. Okay, so now I understand what it is. I prefer Trey Jones to Amir Coffey. I prefer Hamadou Diallo to Kyle Kuzma.
Yes.
All right. I think I understood your question correctly, Bill. If I didn't, reiterate, and I will circle back to that. So getting back to the forward position now, I know you'd said before that James Harden wasn't necessarily your favorite play on the slate, but do you prefer Kevin Durant as a pay-up option to Harden?
Yes. I am more interested in Kevin Durant. He's been the better fantasy player all year. I think both are overpriced, right? I mean, again, you're not playing any of these guys because you think, oh, they're going to get me, 6x value tonight. You're playing them for the raw points. And I just think that Harden, he's been the higher scoring player for most of the season. Durant, has been the higher scoring player for most of the season. Harden's been on a little bit of a tear recently, but I think, again, you play the long-term variance with Durant. Again, to me, these guys pale in comparison to Nikola Jokic. He's the clear answer as a stud. But if you wanted to pair Jokic with one of those guys and go full on stars and scrubs, I would go with Durant because I think it's a little easier to find value guards than it is forwards. And I just like the long-term numbers with Durant a little bit better.
Yeah, I'm a little conflicted. Personally, I'm overweight to both of them. I have slightly more exposure to James Harden than I do of Kevin Durant. I agree with you. right? Because it's just a fact, right? Kevin Durant's been a better fantasy producer this year than James Harden has. That's not something I could debate. That's very much what the case is. You just look at the points per minute, fantasy production, all that. However, if you look at the numbers for the Nets last year, James Harden was the best fantasy producer on the Nets when Kyrie Irving was out. Now, Kyrie Irving has also been out all of this year. However, the free throw rules, like I just mentioned, are reverting back to what they were last year. So I'm starting to think that going forward, we're going to see James Harden as the best fantasy producer on the Nets in the games that Kyrie Irving doesn't play, as opposed to Kevin Durant. And I'm trying to get ahead of the curve on that before everybody else picks up on the change in free throw rules. So for that reason, I'm a little higher on Harden than Durant, but I'm overweight to both. So it's kind of splitting hairs.
Yeah, that's fair.
Anything else at the forward position that is worthwhile talking points to you? Anybody you're getting to that we have not yet talked about?
Well, how do you feel about Serge Ibaka as a value play at 3,300? Because again, I hate to keep harping on this narrative with the Clippers, but old player just returned back to back.
I have exposure to him, and I do not feel great about it. I think his minutes are the most difficult to project of any player on the slate today. And one thing that actually we've got 15 minutes to go until lock right now. One thing I'm kind of playing with here is, do I want to lessen some of the minutes that Serge Ibaka is getting and project some of them to Amir Coffey? So yesterday, I played a lot of Serge Ibaka. It didn't go poorly. It didn't go great, but it didn't go poorly. He scored 22.25 DraftKings points. I was stunned he only played 18 minutes. Serge Ibaka might just be washed up. He started yesterday. 7 points, 7 rebounds, 18 minutes. For his salary, it didn't kill anybody. For today, if he does the same thing at the 3,300 salary on DK, it's not going to kill anybody. I think he's a different looking play on FanDuel, where he's up at 4,000 as opposed to the 3,300 price tag on DK. So I'm getting exposure to Ibaka, but I like other cheap options better just because I'm so uncertain with the minutes of Serge Ibaka, which why wouldn't I be? He played last night, played 18 minutes when I projected him to play nearly 30, and now it's the tail end of a back-to-back. The price is right for him, particularly on DK, but I have no clue what to do with his playing time.
Okay, I feel similarly. He's the guy that I feel the least confident about. Like Morris, he's been playing 37 minutes. So if he plays reduced, maybe he's at 30, 32, something like that. As long as he's active, that is. We obviously have to be prepared for any, late inactive shenanigans. But Ibaka could be a DNP. You never know. He could fall out of the rotation completely. So I'm with you. I have him probably less than what the optimals are suggesting, right? Our optimal rate has him at nearly 27% on DraftKings. I don't feel that good to put him in 27% of my lineups.
Yep, I think that is a fair way to look at it. And there's a lot of cheap value plays to play. So he's not the guy for me, but he's one of the guys. I'm mixing and matching him with some of these other, cheap, crappy forward options like David Nwaba. I kind of put him in the same boat as somebody like Serge Ibaka, Cassius Stanley. It's a lot of these guys. I'm not exactly sure what to expect from them. But I think there's certainly reason to at least roster Serge Ibaka. I'm not going to try to talk anybody off of not playing him at all at 3,300. I'm just not going to be that much different in the field. We do have this starting lineup for the Pistons, and oddly, as expected, Derek Walton Jr., Cassius Stanley, Hamadou Diallo, Sadiq Bey, Luka Garza, just the all-star lineup for the Detroit Pistons. But at least it's nothing crazy and more or less what we were expecting. Anything really stunning to you about that?
What's stunning is that that's what we expected for a professional basketball team. Man, COVID is crazy.
We're going to get to we're like a week away from having the lowest scoring slates we've ever seen, because what's going to happen is all of these teams are going to get healthy at the same time. And then all of a sudden it's going to be like, oh, Hamadou Diallo is 8,200 on a slate where we're expecting to play 18 minutes. And it's going to be impossible to find good DFS plays on a points per dollar basis.
You know what? I'm kind of excited for that, to be honest.
I'm indifferent. I don't care what the final scores are. I know a lot of people oh my God, I scored 360 fantasy points and barely cashed. It doesn't make it to me. It's just, I'm just playing whoever the best guys are projection wise based on what's in front of me. So
I'm just tired of the whole process of picking your DFS pool these days is to just look at what teams have the most injuries, most absences. And there's always been some degree of that, but this year it's crazy.
Yeah, and it's also funny when some of these games, it's like, I'm doing an injury report video earlier in the day, and then players are getting ruled back in, players are getting ruled out. It's just anarchy, man. It is absolute anarchy. Super chat here from the unstoppable Milo Nowhere. Kelden, Johnson, or Claxton on FanDuel? Confident in Johnson's minutes. More confident I am in Claxton's minutes. Claxton's looked really good recently, but I prefer Kelden Johnson and Nick Claxton.
Yeah. Yes. Agreed.
And another question from JEW in our premium Discord channel. He's asking, Harden, Ibaka, Gay, or White, Diallo, Vassell?
I like the second. I'm sure you're gonna like the first.
No, actually, I like the first one better too, because I don't really like Rudy Gay today.
Okay, so you like the second one better?
Yeah. I'm underweight, so I prefer. So of all those players, I think Derek White's the one I have the most exposure to.
Okay.
Actually, maybe it's Derek White. So actually, the players I have the two most exposure to are White and Vassell. And Rudy Gay is my least favorite. So it's going to be the White Diallo and Vassell combination. We all caught up. Yeah, we're all caught up on super chats now. So other guys in the forward position, I think we've hit on everybody now. I'm getting a decent amount of exposure to David Nwaba. I know only played 20 minutes in the start last game. What are you expecting from David Nwaba today? Or maybe in comparison to Serge Ibaka? I slightly prefer Nwaba to Ibaka.
Yeah, it's really not even slightly for me. I like Nwaba. He's been a decent per minute guy this season, and I think we can pretty comfortably pencil him in for, I would say 25 is a fair minute projection for him. So if he gets 25, that's better than what I think we're getting from Serge Ibaka. And as you mentioned, it's not like Ibaka has been crushing it when he's been on the court this season.
I think a lot of these guys are pretty slightly lean towards Nwaba if you're choosing between the two, but it's not the most confident pick in the world. We can move over to the center position, but first, it is New Year's, guys, and you should be bringing in the new year with an Awesemo Plus membership, and for only $20, you get access to all the Awesemo Plus tools and data for 22 days using the promo code 2022. So promo code 2022, and for $20, you get access to everything we have for every DFS sport over at Awesemo Plus. Also, if you're looking to take down slates all year long, use the promo code HAPPY22 for 20% off a year of Awesemo Plus Platinum. Stop guessing, start winning. Join Awesemo Plus today. All right, let's move over to the center position and play Jokic. I mean, I don't even know what else to say. Other than if you have the space to spend up for somebody, Jokic is the priority over Harden, over Durant, over Curry, whoever else is you're considering paying up for. Jokic is the guy for me. I haven't projected for more than 10 more fantasy points than anybody else on the slate. He's been ridiculous this year. I think he's kind of getting shafted from an MVP discussion standpoint, not because of anything he's doing, but it's because his bench sucks. If the Denver Nuggets had a competent bench this year, nothing else changes. No, Jokic plays exactly the same. He's getting everything the same out of guys like Campazzo, Aaron Gordon, Will Barton. This is a team that wins 65 games, but because the Nuggets bench is so crappy, and this is a tweet from 3 weeks ago now, but at least at the time, when Jokic was on the court, the Denver Nuggets had a plus minus that put them on pace to be a 67 win team. When Jokic is off the court, Denver gets outscored at a pace that would have them as a 7-win team this year. MVP, in my opinion, but I know a lot of people are ultimately going to look at the standings and kind of discredit him. That aside, Jokic is very clearly the pay-up option today. I don't mean to put words in your mouth, Matt, but you're about to agree with me.
Completely agree. We're running out of ways to describe this man's greatness.
He is, the matchup against Houston couldn't be easier. Denver, like we mentioned, the bench sucks, so most of their games still end up being pretty competitive. He had that one weird game where he got benched against the Thunder because he was playing poorly and they're getting blown out. Other than that, though, you just pencil this guy in for 60-plus fantasy points and just look elsewhere. And especially on these slates where we have all of the value in the world because of all these COVID situations, it's so easy to pay up for Jokic. Do it. Play Jokic in cash games today. Play him in tournaments. He is going to be in nearly all of my lineups today. I don't even know what the counterpoint is. Is there any pushback against Jokic that you could throw out?
Just to play devil's advocate, the pushback would be I want to roster a value center like Luka Garza or Daniel Gafford. And I feel like I can get better production from value at the center spot than I could at guard or forward. But it's not a good argument. It's just, that's the best I could do.
Yeah, and once again, I get maybe you might think the cost is a little bit restrictive at 12.6 on DK, and then his price point. Actually, I want to refresh the ownership page. His price point on FanDuel 11.7. The 11.7 price on FanDuel is way too low. But even so, I mean, I think 37% ownership for Jokic on FanDuel is too low. 40% on DK, even that I think is too low because there's all the value in the world. It's not difficult to spend up for him. The only way I don't think that he lands in the optimal lineup today is if multiple stars outscore him. So if like Harden and Steph Curry both have bigger games than Jokic, then he gets left off the optimal lineup, or else I think he's pretty likely to be on it. Super chat here from Demetrius Johnson, DraftKings question: Jokic, Vassell and White, or Vucevic, Kuzma and Barton? It is the Jokic side for a lot of the reasons that I just said.
Yeah, and thanks for tuning in, Demetrius Johnson. Glad to see that you're doing well.
Yeah, all the way from 1FC over in Japan, I believe he's fighting in now, Demetrius Johnson. Let's see. Are we all okay? All caught up on super chats now. So let's talk about some of the value centers now. And my highest priority at center is Jokic. No doubt. I still think there's other guys worth getting to. Daniel Gafford, once again, same situations, as the other slate, no Montrezl Harrell. So Gafford's going to play extended minutes. Also, last game, Gafford briefly had to leave the game because he had a leg injury. So he ended up playing 32 minutes. But keep in mind that he had to leave the court because of that leg injury, go to the locker room, or else we could have seen upper 30s minutes from him. He is my second favorite center play on the slate. Who are the other guys you're looking at in lineups that you don't have Jokic, or on DK if you're looking to play multiple centers?
So I do have some like dual stud center lineups tonight. I have some Rudy Gobert. He's pricey. 9,600 is definitely a lot for Rudy Gobert, but he historically does some of his best work against the Warriors. They're thin in the front court right now with no Draymond Green. I think he could have a big game, so I'm plugging him in at 9,600. But the guy that I really like is Christian Wood at 8,800. No Şengün. I think it's one of those things that like sneakily is going to give Wood a couple of a little more upside that maybe not be being factored in by most people, right? In his last game, he got up to around 35 minutes, did Wood. He had been playing closer to like the lower 30s, high 20s even before that. So I think if we give Wood, 34, 35 minutes again tonight, I like his upside for his price tag. He's showing up with a slightly positive leverage score in the boom bust tool. So I will say that I have 80% Jokic at the moment. In the 20% that I don't have Jokic, I have either one or both of Gobert or Wood.
So the lineups I don't have Jokic, I really like I mentioned, I like Daniel Gafford today, or I'm going cheaper at center. Guys like Luka Garza, JaMychal Green. I lowered my exposure to him, but he's still in my player pool as more of a contrarian option. Serge Ibaka, if you need to go cheap at center on DK because he does have center eligibility. So if I'm not going Jokic, it's generally to go cheaper. I'm not getting to some of the other more expensive centers. Vooch is a little bit interesting to me, just from the standpoint of he's finally starting to make shots, which is something he didn't do over the start of the season. Where do you stand with Daniel Gafford? Because I talked about him briefly, but you didn't really mention Gafford there. Are you on him today or not really?
Yes, definitely. I don't want to make it sound like I don't have Gafford. I would say that he's my second highest owned center behind Jokic. But I just, we've kind of hit on all the points with him, right? He's going to play essentially all the minutes at center now without Montrezl Harrell, and he's a 1.1 fantasy point per minute type of dude. So he's a great value option. I have a lot of two center lineups. I have a lot of Jokic and Gafford. I have a lot of Jokic and another, pay up center. The guy that I am a little bit underweight on compared to the field is Garza. Again, I don't feel like there's a ton of upside with him. I know that he's had two games, right? He had a 31-point game in 20 minutes, and then he had a 23-point game in 39 minutes. So it's like, which player is he, right? Is he the 1.5 fantasy point per minute guy or the 0.5? The truth is he's probably somewhere in the middle. But I think I just feel like by playing Garza, the opportunity cost of not having Jokic or Gafford or one of these other stud centers is just a little bit too high for me.
Here's something that I've observed over the years that makes it difficult to predict some of these backup big men when they get thrust into the starting lineup. They put up pretty good points per minute fantasy numbers when they're on the bench and playing in garbage time against equally crappy players. And then a lot of them see radically different points per minute production as a starting center where they're playing against better competition. So we're kind of seeing something similar this year with Luka Garza, where he's made, it's only 4 starts this year, so we're not looking at that much of a sample size. But as a starter, he's averaging under 20 DraftKings points per game in 25 minutes as a starter. Whereas when he's coming off the bench, he's a point per minute fantasy producer guy. And it is really hard to balance that sometimes, especially if you're familiar with any kind of, projections or how you rate out players. You give guys generally a baseline projection, and a lot of it will be confirmed over the course of the season because you see somebody, it's like, oh, look, this guy's played, 30 games as the backup center, moves into the starting lineup. And I'll tend to over project a lot of these guys just because the rates are not going to be the same as the starters as a backup. That's where I kind of think Garza fits into this. So I had to nerf his projection manually a little bit. Still my player pool, I have around 20% of them, but it isn't the highest priority cheap option for me today.
Yeah, I think that's super fair. I mean, you see a lot of the same stuff with like the PER numbers, right? JaVale McGee is always like the PER leader because he just comes in, plays 15 high intensity minutes.
Hold up, but it's also because he's like the best player in the league. There's different things at play here. And we're talking about a legend like JaVale McGee. By the way, we are
number one, JaVale McGee.
we are at lock right now, guys. But Matt LaMarca and I, we're not going anywhere. We've got 30 minutes to talk about prize picks, 30 minutes to tilt the games. I'm right now trying to figure out which game I want to get on my second screen here. So we've got, I don't care about Pelicans Bucks because it's not on the main slate. Who cares about games I don't have money on? But we've got Pistons Spurs, Wizards Bulls. I got to watch Spurs Pistons, right? This is the key game with all the value plays here. So
the marquee game, the one that everybody wants to see tonight.
Hey, it is for me. What's great? Here's my favorite thing about pulling up League Pass right now on NBA. They have these like previews where it's like key players of the game, and it's never guys that are playing. So we have the leaders right here that it has as the promotion for Spurs Pistons is DeJounte Murray and Jeremy Grant. Neither of them are playing today. Let's see which other players are out today. Clippers Nets, they've got Paul George up there. But the other ones are pretty good. But yeah, the Spurs Pistons game, most of the guys are up there. Not going to end up being in the game. That aside, let's talk about some prize picks. Guys, if you guys are new to prize picks, head on over there, sign up using the promo code Awesemo. Not only do you get up to $100 bonus on your first deposit, you also get 1 free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. So now, right now, Matt, you and I are going to break down some prize picks. Do me a favor, pull up Odd Shopper, and I want you to find some of the props that have the best expected chance to hit the over or the under, and we'll compare those to the props of the players over at prize picks. And we'll try to avoid the Spurs, Pistons, and Wizards Bulls just because that game locks in 8 minutes. If anything looks, outstanding, like it stands out to you, then you can bring that up to me and we'll look at some of those players. But other than that, I think we should avoid it just because of the short shelf life of those plays. If anybody has any questions about any individual players we're looking at on prize picks, feel free to throw those into the YouTube chat or add us in Discord, and I'll answer those as well. But starting lineup for the Nets: Harden, Mills, Durant, Brown, Aldridge. No surprises there. Have you had time to pull up the?
Yeah, I got one that I really like right off the rip here, and we have it grading out very well at Odd Shopper. Jordan Clarkson under 15.5 points.
That is the same number that he has over on Prize Picks, 15.5 points. Let's see.
So we have that as a 69% win rate. And Clarkson has been heating up a little bit for the Jazz, but I think you have to kind of keep in mind that the Jazz are facing the best defensive team in basketball tonight by a considerable margin. They're nearly 3 points per 100 possessions better on the defensive end than any other team in basketball, the Warriors, that is. So I actually wrote up a single game parlay piece today that you can find on Awesemo, and a lot of it was just taking Jazz unders.
Yeah, and something else to mention about the Utah Jazz, not only is this matchup far from ideal, they've got guys coming back. Mike Conley was recently resting. He's back. Joe Ingles was out yesterday. He was on the injury report, but ended up getting ruled out late. he is back playing today. All of that means less playing time for Jordan Clarkson. And pulling up Clarkson's numbers for the year, he's still somebody who at any given point in time could have a big game. But on average, he's going to be under this point total more often than not. And for this season, he's averaging 15 points per game. And that's still less than 15 and a half. Then you also consider the matchup here. So I think that certainly the under for Jordan Clarkson, I agree with you, makes a whole lot of sense. Who are some of the other Utah players you're looking at?
I had the under on Donovan Mitchell. I had the under on Bojan Bogdanovic. I had the under on some rebounding props for the Utah guys. The logic on that one being that the Warriors are the third best rebounding team, and their rebound rate actually goes up with Draymond off the court this season. So just a lot of unders all around in this game.
Yeah, and by the way, something else just that kind of strikes me talking about Clarkson is so people are aware of how some of our tools work over on OddsShopper is it's based on simulations. So if you look at Jordan Clarkson, his ceiling games are pretty substantial, but they don't happen that often. And I'm just kind of making up a number off the top of my head, but a lot of Jordan Clarkson would be like, oh, two crappy games, one really big game, 3 crappy games, one really big game. So while he averages 15 points per game for the season, it's not like he alternates being over and under 15 points. And if you look at how our projections work on OddsShopper, it's based on game simulations. So we simulate the games out X amount of times, and then it's based on, hey, these are the amount of times that Jordan Clarkson, based on our simulations, was over or under the 15 points. And just because of how highly variant Jordan Clarkson is, just because it's 15 points doesn't mean he alternates going 15 on average. He's way all over the place in terms of variance. And that's why somebody like Jordan Clarkson, you'd still more often than not expect him to be under some of those point averages, just because his games where he goes over a lot of times are games where he's scoring like 25 points or something way over that number. So if anybody ever looks at that and it'll say like, oh, how come Jordan Clarkson is an over under of 15 and a half points? How come you guys haven't projected for say like 14 and a half, but it's so likely hits the under? That's the reason why. It's because the projection doesn't necessarily indicate the percentage of time that he goes over or under. Did I explain that properly? It made sense in my head.
Well
but sometimes
said. Well said, sir.
Sometimes the words, they make sense in your head, but then when they come out, it doesn't always portray in the correct manner. Throw some other props at me, and then we'll look at some fantasy point totals as well.
Yeah. So let's go. What was a game that we had talked about that we kind of liked? Let's go to the Clippers. Again, the Clippers are kind of a team that I think are a important team on this slate. We have right now, Eric Bledsoe points. Eric Bledsoe points. Is that one listed on Prize Picks?
The points aren't. Let me see if the fantasy points are. It looks like just because of the injury situation, they don't have that many of the Clippers guys listed, which will happen when there's injury situations.
Well, we can pivot down to Reggie Jackson. Reggie Jackson points only slightly less profitable than Eric Bledsoe points, according to OddsShopper. But we have the under on 20 and a half for Reggie at a 73% expected win rate.
The one is it does look like Prize Picks is a slightly more fair points projection. They have Reggie Jackson for over under 19 and a half points. Let's see, where do I have Reggie Jackson today? What's been stunning about the Nets this year? They have a good defense. If you were to tell me things that you weren't expecting about the Nets, and by the way, this season's been totally wonky, all in all, I would not have expected the Nets to have a better defense than they have offense, which has been the case for the majority of the season.
Lockdown, baby.
Yeah, let's see. Reggie Jackson. Where do I have Reggie Jackson? I like the under for 19 and a half still. What is the points projection we have for him?
We have him at 17.2. So plenty of wiggle room there.
Yeah, I'm a little higher than that, but still, I like the under 19 and a half. I still think that's something to attack. Let's look at the fantasy points also. And just to reiterate also, if you guys are looking to play any of the fantasy point props over on Prize Picks, same exact scoring as FanDuel. So you're looking at a point for a point, 1.5 points for an assist, 1.2 for a rebound, -1 for a turnover, 3 points for a block, 3 points for a steal. All right. Fantasy point total. Reggie Jackson is at 29 and a half. Let's see. That's pretty fair to me. 29 and a half. I don't really have anything that I see being too much different there. Wonder what Jordan Clarkson is for fantasy point total. So we mentioned liking the under for points. It stands to reason the under for fantasy points is going to make sense as well.
Yes. We had, let's see.
Jordan Clarkson. Matt, screw the under for points. He's at 29. He's at 29 fantasy points. So I have to take a Jordan Clarkson prop. I'm taking the under on 29 fantasy points before 15 points. Even though I still think the under on the points makes sense, I really like the under for fantasy points. I've got him more than 5 fantasy points below this.
Yeah, sure. I would take the under on, I think, almost all the players in this game, with the possible exception of Rudy Gobert.
Let's see.
You know, I feel like 44.5 is probably high for Mitchell. 48 feels a little high for Steph. Off just the top of my head. I mean, you're the man with the projections. You can probably chime in on this a little bit more accurately, but this all feels kind of like baseline stuff for the Jazz, who have been just so good offensively this year. But again, this is the toughest spot they'll face all season.
42.5 is probably a little low for Gobert. I'm not sure I would necessarily want to take the over there, just because I think it's about accurate. If I was forced to take a side, over under, like here's the way I like to say these props. If you took bearded producer Tyler and you said to me, we are going to kidnap him, his life is on the line, the only way to save him is you have to guess correctly on the over-under prop for Rudy Gobert. And assuming that for whatever reason I wanted to save Tyler, I would take the over.
I was going to say, what's the incentive here?
Yeah, if I was looking, the incentive is that I don't want to produce my own shows. If the downside, but on the other side, if it was, you know, something where it's like, hey, you know, there's some leverage to be had if I show I could produce shows and I want to be wrong on Gobert. But if I'm trying to take the right side of Rudy Gobert, I would lean towards the over, but or else it would just be a no action play for me.
Okay, fair.
Did we just get a weird starting lineup? Let's see. Oh, okay. We've got news.
Oh,
Amir Coffey is starting for the Clippers. Marcus Morris is not. I do not think Marcus Morris plays today.
Red fire alert, red alarm, 3, you know, like that's a big one for me. I had a lot of Momo. I had some coffee too, but now I will have oodles of him.
Would you, if he's not starting, and by the way, this game locks in 19 minutes, this is going to be a massive talking point now. There's no reason to assume that he's going to play minutes coming off the bench, correct?
Hard fade on Marcus Morris. Yeah. Even if he does play off the bench, what's the upside to having him in your fantasy lineups?
You know what's even weirder though? They're starting Ibaka still. All right, but either way, all right. Starting lineup for the Los Angeles Clippers: Reggie Jackson, Eric Bledsoe, Terrence Mann, Amir Coffey, Serge Ibaka. I really don't think Marcus Morris plays today.
Yeah, right. Because they're playing the Nets. It's not like they need the size of Coffee at power forward. Like it to me, yes, this smells fishy. Smells like a Marcus Morris doesn't play game.
Yeah, this feels like a rest game to me. I'm not saying I'm fairly confident he doesn't play, but that aside, I think he's too risky to play in DFS. Like even on the off chance that he comes off the bench and plays limited minutes, I don't take the risk. Take him out of your lineups today. Swap onto some other guys. Amir Coffey now. Give me Amir Coffey. He's going to be a slept on value option here, who I think has potential to play fairly substantial minutes.
Yeah, and you would have to think, the issue with him, or the issue with some of the Clippers, is you have to worry about blowout risk. I don't really feel that concerned about that with Amir Coffey, right? You know, he's going to play. You would think he's going to play regardless.
Yeah, and we've got Eric Bledsoe starting now. I don't know that I'm dying to play Eric Bledsoe considering the amount of value we have on the slate. It makes him at least viable to me if you have some lineups that have him. Also, as I'm kind of updating some of this and looking through these guys, Amir Coffey is definitely going to be the number one standout. Does this change how you view Serge Ibaka at all? Because we were unsure about his minutes, but if we're taking Marcus Morris out of the mix, does that mean more minutes go to Serge Ibaka?
It's possible. I don't know why they would do that. It might make me take a more serious look at Justice Winslow, if I'm being completely honest.
Okay, let's try to sell me on Justice Winslow.
He's been, like a steady part of their rotation recently. 18 minutes yesterday, 17 a few games ago. Winslow is a relatively productive player when he hits the court. He's averaged just under 0.9 DraftKings points per minute this season. But if they are going to rest Morris, it doesn't make sense to me to then give all of those minutes to Serge Ibaka. And that's unless they just don't care about Serge Ibaka anymore. If they're like, whatever, we can wear Ibaka down, I don't care. Then I guess that's something, but to me, it makes sense. If you're going to take it easy on one, you take it easy on the other. And Winslow kind of jumps out as the next guy up in the rotation to me.
I have Amir Coffey projected for more fantasy points than Serge Ibaka now.
I think that's very reasonable.
Justice Winslow. Let's give Justice Winslow 22 minutes. That might get me some exposure to him. Obviously, it doesn't make him somebody that I'm be getting a ton of exposure to, but at least they'll get him in the player pool. Let's see. Is this game still? Oh, nice. We're underway in the Spurs Pistons game and the the Bulls Wizards game. Got totally sidetracked by everything that was going on with this Clippers news, which also, guys, that's the reason to stick around for these last 30 minutes, where even if you aren't playing on PrizePicks, you're contemplating playing on PrizePicks, signing up with that promo code Awesemo. There's always something for everybody in these last 30 minutes because this time in NBA, there's always unexpected lineup changes and things that go down. So updated my lineups, and I'll give you some updates on those when they come out. I'm also curious. I'm going to look over at PrizePicks, and let's look at some of the Clippers props here on PrizePicks, because I do think this is something that's going to have to change how we view some of these Clippers guys also on PrizePicks now from a fantasy perspective. Let's see, Terrence Mann over under 27.5 fantasy points. So they only have Terrence Mann and Reggie Jackson up right now. I like the over for Terrence Mann now. I think he benefits a ton from there being no Marcus Morris. Would you agree with that?
Yes. Yeah. And we talked about Reggie Jackson being a clear under, and now I don't feel as nearly as good about that.
Yeah, same. I think there's more usage that goes to Reggie Jackson now. Actually, if anything, I think the number's too low on Reggie Jackson. That's how quickly things could change. I went from thinking the number was too high on Reggie Jackson to now too low. Definitely unexpected news. All right, so updating some lineups here. Let's see what has changed for me. Amir Coffey, 20% of my lineups now. I dig it. I like getting to the Amir Coffey exposure today. Amir Coffey also really weird eligibility for Amir Coffey on DK. He's small. He's shooting guard and small forward eligible, and he's starting at power forward today. But whatever, that aside, I certainly like getting to Amir Coffey. He's in the wrong position. Not that it's anything outlandish for FanDuel and DraftKings. We've been seeing guys in the wrong positions for quite some time now. But
the best is Delano Banton.
Oh yeah, he was point guard
on DraftKings and power forward on FanDuel, or vice versa.
And I mean, he ended up starting at point guard the last time he started, but almost all his minutes this year have been played at small forward.
Yeah, love it.
Which is, par for the course. All right, lineups are uploaded. Are you good on uploading lineups? If you need me to kill time, I'll talk for a little bit.
No, I'm good. I've actually been. I pulled up the ownership from that first wave of games. Who do you think is the highest owned player in this early wave between the Spurs, Pistons, Bulls, and Wizards?
Diallo.
He's second. 36 and change.
Derek White then?
He's third. 36 and change.
Is it the man, the myth, the legend, Cassius Stanley?
No,
Trey Jones?
No, he's a little further down. Value play for the Spurs, Devin Vassell. Oh, okay. 41% owned.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's not crazy to me. I hate the stupid NBA TV logging me out, so I have to log back in while I'm doing it. Guys, I've got stuff to do. Do you really have to? Do you have to? Are people really dying to steal games off your shitty platform that never works properly?
I can't even get on. I have NBA League Pass because I have DirecTV. I just buy it through DirecTV. I can't log on. It's impossible. So I'm restricted to watching on my television.
It's the worst product that I have to buy every single year. By the way,
That's
updated
right,
tweet.
Greg.
Marcus Morris only available in case of emergency. So what we were expecting. I would have preferred that news didn't come out because you and I are both anticipating there was going to be no Marcus Morris minutes. Now we basically know for sure that there's going to be no Marcus Morris minutes. All right, let's look at what's happening in these games now, just from a fantasy perspective of what's ongoing. And we could start tilting some of the fantasy scores for these players. All right. So from the Spurs and Pistons, Kelden Johnson, big old goose egg so far, actually negative fantasy points. Trey Jones only played 4 minutes. Then he checked out. He ended up scoring 2 points in his 4 minutes and then went to Bryn Forbes off the bench. Panic time? Perhaps.
Hamadou faders. Avert your eyes, Hamadou faders.
Hamadou Diallo, 4 points, 3 rebounds, an assist and a steal in the first 5 minutes of the game. Luka Garza, 2 rebounds and a steal. Cassius Stanley, 3 points. Sadiq Bey, 2 points and a rebound. Yeah, really the only players, I mean, like whatever, Derek White also has a block. I didn't see that before. So Derek White is off to a pretty good start, as is Hamadou Diallo, and everybody else from this game kind of sucks as of now. I guess whatever, Cassius Stanley in 5 minutes instead of 3. That's not the end of the world. Anything else of interest here? Nope. If anybody is just checking us out now, it looks like Marcus Morris is not going to be playing minutes today. So make sure to take him out of any lineups you have. Also, do Matt and I a favor for the new year. Like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel just for the new year, because I'm trying to find ways to hawk for likes and subs. And why not say it's because of the new year? As if today is any different than yesterday. It's just the calendar flipped, but everybody does everything different. So I kind of find that funny where the new year changes and everybody's like, oh my God, everything's totally different now. You know, it's going to be better than 2021, 2022. Why? Because it's tomorrow. It's the exact same. Like nothing's changed from yesterday to today. It's just we've changed a number. All right.
It's a highly logical take that I'm going to choose to completely disagree with. Life's all about your mindset, Greg.
Let's see what's happened so far in the Bulls-Wizards game. So Daniel Gafford, torrid start, picks up 5 points and a rebound in 3 minutes. 2 fouls though, in foul trouble. Comes off the court, but it's a good start for. It was a good start for Gafford until that foul trouble. Other guys in this game, 4 points, 2 assists for Bradley Beal. Whatever. Nobody else really of too much note from a fantasy perspective. We do have a super chat here from Cheyenne DeWald. Barton and Royce O'Neal or Coffee and Mann on FanDuel? Given the most recent news we have, Coffee and Mann.
Yep.
And not really too much debate there. Like to me, Royce O'Neal is not somebody I'm particularly interested in on this slate. Will Barton, I have no issue with, but Coffee, now that he's starting, Coffee is going to go way under-owned. If we had this Marcus Morris news, I don't know, an hour ago, Amir Coffee be a chalk play on the slate, but considering the timing of when it came out, he's just not going to be that popular. So I look at Amir Coffee as the highest priority GPP play on the entire slate for me now.
I have no problem with that.
All right, let's see. We've got the Pistons Spurs game starting back up about halfway through the first quarter. If anybody's watching along with me, there is 6:49 left on the clock on my TV right now, and Bryn Forbes just knocked down a 3 on a pass from Derek White. So, you know, it's funny to look at some of these plays, and I have 0% Bryn Forbes, but there was a point in the day where I considered getting to some of Bryn Forbes as a pivot off of Trey Jones. I didn't, so I can't actually say anything with if he actually works out, but we do see some people in the chat saying Kelden Johnson is a bust. You're damn right. Kelden Johnson's been a bust. So far, Kelden Johnson has negative fantasy points, and he has taken 1 shot. So the stat line on Kelden Johnson, 0 points, 0 rebounds, 0 assists, 0 steals, 0 blocks, 0-1 from the field, and 1 turnover. Steve Leibowitz.
Hamadou feasts.
Did he just, was that Sadiq Bey who hit a 3 in the corner?
He's up to, I'm not watching the game. I'm watching the box score, but he's up to 6 points, 3 boards, 2 dimes, and a steal. 7 shot attempts through 6 minutes. Have a day, Hamadou.
Well, that's going to be the end of me is going to be Bryn Forbes. That's a runner in the lane. The end of me is going to be not playing Hamadou Diallo at 7,700 at massive ownership. Let's see. What did the ownership actually end up being on Hamadou Diallo? I haven't looked at any of the
36.5%.
Who scores more fantasy points today, Kelden Johnson or Marcus Morris?
Kelden's on the board. I'm going to take Kelden.
Oh, he just pulled down a rebound. All right. Let's see. And then Luka Gar's just awful defense in transition and gives up an easy layup to Kelden Johnson. But all right, so at least in the $4 on DK, that's the first contest I'm going to pull up here. The ownership on Hamadou Diallo is here he is. All right, Hamadou Diallo at 7,700, 38% owned. That's almost exactly what we had projected. Super chat here from Crooked Samaritan. Nwaba or Bruce Brown on FanDuel? That is David Nwaba for me.
Yeah, I really haven't considered Bruce Brown at all today.
Yeah, especially when the Nets are getting healthier. So there was times where the Nets were so shorthanded, we're considering playing, like David Duke was a chalk play on some of these slates. And, now we're at a situation with the Nets where they're starting to get guys back. So we have a pretty full rotation for the Nets. And sure, there's certain games where Bruce Brown ends up, going off. But even as a starter this year, he generally has not performed that well in games where Durant and Harden are active. And it's just a lot of usage to go around on this team too. So overall as a starter this year, 16 starts for Bruce Brown, 28 minutes per game, 20 DraftKings points. Not going to get it done on a slate like this. No interest in Bruce Brown for me. David Nwaba all day there. Not that David Nwaba is some fantasy stud either, but look at but you look at the overall prospects of the Houston Rockets, and there's a reason this team gets their asses kicked every day. It's because they don't have good players. So they've got Christian Wood, Kevin Porter, Jalen Green, massive disappointment as a rookie this year.
Dude, the Jalen Green on-off numbers, maybe the most disgusting thing I have ever seen. So, because I wrote about this because the Rockets happened to go on that weird little win streak, right? Where they won however many it was in a row. And it just so happened to coincide with Green hitting the sidelines. So the Rockets net rating has decreased by 16.5 points with 18 points. 18 points, negative 18 net rating for Jalen Green this season.
Yeah, so it's not hard to explain, right? He's been bad on defense, which whatever, the entire team sucks on defense, and then on offense he shoots a lot and doesn't make the shots. So you put all those together, and it's hard to do well when you got a guy who's a massive usage rate guy who never makes any of the shots he takes. So the efficiency numbers for Jalen Green this year, and I really like Jalen Green just in general. I really like the career path he took. It's something way different from what a lot of young players do. It's something that I think a lot of them should be doing. Going to the G League, go playing overseas, make more money than you would make playing college basketball. Although maybe the landscape changes now that some kids can make money in college. But actually, the efficiency numbers slightly better for Jalen Green than they were earlier in the season, but still 31% from three, 39% from the field. He makes free throws, but doesn't get to the free throw line. That's problematic. And he's not a great playmaker for his teammates. Still like the upside from Jalen Green going forward, but at least for now, it's not been great.
Yeah, I know you were definitely team Evan Mobley, but I will stand hard for the fact that I was team Jalen Green over Mobley all day, every day.
I have a lot of money invested in Evan Mobley Rookie of the Year, and I'm pretty excited about it right now. So hopefully nothing happens with him health-wise. A couple super chats to get to. Bill W. asked, can you answer my question again, Trey Jones or Amir Coffey? Well, Trey Jones' game has already started, so there's nothing you can do about it now. If I had to choose with the information I had now, the answer would be Amir Coffey, but we didn't know that Marcus Morris wasn't going to be playing at that point in time earlier.
Right,
Super chat
especially after Trey Jones was lifted for Bryn Forbes after 5 minutes.
4 minutes and 19 seconds, sir. Another super chat from Byron's Journey. Coffey, Serge, or Gordon on FanDuel? All right, so I really like Amir Coffey and Serge Ibaka. Now Coffey's my favorite play of those. But if we're talking about Aaron Gordon, it's different salary ranges. So Aaron Gordon,
I was thinking Eric Gordon. Eric Gordon.
Well, Eric Gordon's out.
Then don't play him.
Yeah, so it has to be Aaron Gordon, especially because he's talking about power forwards on FanDuel. It's still Aaron Gordon there.
I still think I'm taking Coffey.
Really? It's still Aaron Gordon for me, but
yeah, you're right. I mean, that's a safe answer.
So if you have the ability to pay up and spend that money elsewhere, then I would say go with Coffey and spend up somewhere else. But if this is just you have one spot in your lineup, you're trying to decide Aaron Gordon or Amir Coffey, I still have Aaron Gordon projected for more fantasy points.
Fair.
So by the way, the follow-up tweet, the information on Marcus Morris is that they're just being cautious with his knee and that he played a bunch of minutes last night. We did have another question in our Discord channel. This was also from JEW saying, can you elaborate on Coffee over Ibaka? Sure. Ibaka played 18 minutes yesterday and Amir Coffey is starting, and I think he's going to play a lot more minutes. Does that mean that Serge Ibaka isn't playable? No, I think that Serge Ibaka is certainly in play today. I just prefer Amir Coffey because I think we're going to see a lot more ownership go to Serge Ibaka, given how late this news came out about Marcus Morris. So I have Coffey projected for slightly more fantasy points than Serge Ibaka, and it's solely because of a minutes projection. But in terms of ownership,
we're not talking a huge sample size here. But do you know what Ibaka's top fantasy game is this season?
I don't know, like 28 fantasy points,
26.25.
What's Amir?
I have no interest in playing a chalk guy with that low of a ceiling, and maybe he does play 27 minutes tonight and makes me look foolish, but I'll live with that.
What is Amir Coffey's ceiling game?
I think Amir Coffey, I mean, we've seen him play 28 minutes the last two nights. He's gotten to 21 and 23. So I think if you bump him up, if you give him some of Morris's minutes, I guess his ceiling's pretty similar. So,
by the way, ever since you took a victory lap on Hamadou Diallo, how many fantasy points do you think he scored?
Hamadou, I don't know, negative something.
Yeah, he's had a turnover, no other stats other than a personal foul since you. So at this point now, considering we're almost at the end of the first quarter and Hamadou Diallo has 14 fantasy points, is that even that good of a result at this point?
It's an amazing result.
It's fine. It's not he's not breaking the slate or anything right now.
It's an amazing result. He's going to be at 25 by halftime, 55 at the end of the game.
Trey Jones checked back in. The Spurs should just be playing this guy all game. 5 minutes now, 4 points, 2 rebounds. All right, that is going to do it for us today. Thank you guys very much for watching. Anything else that comes up on the slate, hit me up on Twitter. Hit Matt LaMarca up on Twitter. We'll answer any questions you guys have. It's going to be an interesting night. We've got a lot going on in terms of later news. We still got some Denver guys that we're potentially waiting on the starting lineup there. Other than that, Matt, any closing thoughts? Who are we rooting for today? Amir Coffey?
Yeah, clearly now we're rooting for Amir Coffey. We're rooting for Jokic, and I'm rooting for modest games from the Nets stars.
There we go. And go screw yourself, Hamadou Diallo. Good luck. Good night, guys.